Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei become a heroes of justice? If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Prologue. The 10-year-old Issei was crying since his friend was leaving for England. He didn't know why they were suddenly living, but his friend's father said that it was important and he didn't want to leave his child alone in Japan, so Issei gave up and ran away. So right now, he was alone in the park, crying for his friend's sudden leaving. He was trying to stop the tears from leaking out of his eyes, but he wasn't able to, he just held on trying to cry too much and just let out tears. He was approached by a silver-haired man wearing a skin-tight sleeveless black bodysuit on the upper part of his body and black jeans on below. The stranger talked to him, asking why he was crying. "Why are you crying, Brett?" he asked in a somehow jaded voice as he looked directly at him. Issei just looked up, seeing grey eyes staring back at him. The eyes made him somehow fearful, but he just explained why he cried. "My friend went overseas today, but he promised that we'll both become heroes," Issei explained as he tried to stop the tears from leaking out. "Hero?" Issei saw the man raising an eyebrow from his mention of the word hero. "How can we become heroes if we're not together?" he cried out at the silver-haired man as he screamed his frustrations. "Give up on being a hero, Brett. There are no heroes in the world." The silver-haired man reprimanded him, which just made him even more frustrated. First, his friend left him alone, breaking their promise of becoming heroes together. And now there was a man in front of him, saying that heroes do not exist. His mom said that saying bad words against older people will get him punished, but he didn't care this time. "You're a liar. Heroes exist. Like Batman, Superman, Robin Hood," he yelled at silver-haired man, startling him and making the silver-haired man look at him weirdly. The silver-haired man just argued back at him, saying that they are not true. "Stop living in a fantasy, Brett. They don't exist. You should just stop dreaming of becoming a hero." Issei was scared by the irritated voice the silver-haired man used, but he didn't give up. "I'm not dreaming to become a hero, I'll become a hero," he stated with a childish smile in his face as he looked expectantly at the silver-haired man, hoping that the man would just give up on making him give up. He saw the man staring at him with something akin to reminiscent look, but since he didn't know what the man was feeling, he just grinned smugly at him before speaking. "You're not saying anything. Then you realize that I'll become a hero," Issei stated as he stand tall, proud of himself as he pointed his thumb at himself, declaring defiance at the silver-haired man who was looking at him confounded in daze. "I see," the silver-haired man muttered in an inaudible tone, but he heard it. He was looking at Issei with an unreadable expression as he was staring with Issei, as if he was judging him and looking at him appraisingly. "Prove it to me," the silver man stated at Issei seriously, making him stiffen nervously, but he just listened. "If you proved your medal of being a hero is true, then perhaps we'll meet again someday. That moment, I will test your convictions, and if you fail, accept the fact that heroes never exists." Issei didn't understand what the silver-haired man said, but his words kept ringing in his mind as he unconsciously recorded it inside his head. It was something that will test his worth of being determined to become a hero. He saw the silver-haired man turning his back as he started walking away from him, but he saw the silver-haired man look behind his shoulders. He wanted to cower in fear, but he didn't. He wanted to show that he'll become a hero, so he looked at the silver-haired man directly in the eye. The gray metallic eyes met the brown determined eyes. At that moment, there was an unspoken promise between the two. Should they meet next time, it will be a fight to prove each other's ideals and beliefs, putting everything in line to show who is right and who is wrong. Scene break. "Where did you go, Ice?" his mother asked him worriedly as she grabbed him in the shoulders, looking at Issei's eye. "Well, in the park, since I didn't want anyone to see me crying since Irina left me," he replied in a depressed tone. That made his mother look at him sadly before she tried to cheer her somber child. "Are you okay now?" Irina-chan was sad as well. "Since the two of you would be separated," she spoke at Issei, grabbing his attention as she continued. "But don't worry. Irina-chan said that you'll meet again in the future," she stated at Issei in a merry tone as she finished. "Yeah. And when we meet next time, both me and Irina will become hero." Issei raised both of his hands in the air as he declared that proudly. His mother just smiled at him as she patted him in the head. "Did anything else happen? You didn't talk to any strangers, right?" she regretted as she just asked at her child. She saw Issei's eyes, which were happy earlier, change to a determined one. While she might have been happy about that, there was a dreadful feeling creeping up on her as she looked at the determined eyes of her child, but she just shrugged it off as she shook her head, waiting for Issei's answer. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I talked to someone I don't know." He spoke apologetically as he looked downwards, not wanting to face his angry mother right now. When her mother didn't respond, he continued. "But he was making me angry. He said that heroes don't exist. I'll show him." he proclaimed in front of his mother. His face could be seen filled with conviction as he made a bump fist in the air. Scene break. Did that satisfy you, Zelrich? The silver-haired man called out towards the old man who was just stroking his beard while he was looking amused in his eyes. After a few seconds, he stopped stroking his beard as he grinned at the silver-haired man. It did. Archer, you're bringing a hero in making. I wonder how would this turn up, the old man named Zelrich stated in glee as his eyes was filled with obvious mirth, looking at the silver-haired man named Archer. I'm glad that you chose me to be your toy. He stated dryly at Zelrich, his voice was filled with sarcasm as he glared at Zelrich hatefully. The old man never let his grin drop as he replied at Archer. Don't be like that, Archer. Do this old man a favor and entertain me, will you? That remark made a tick mark appear in Archer's head. Archer was really tempted to project a certain crimson spear and gut the vampire in the heart. If it wasn't for the deal that the dead apostle would take Rin as his apprentice, he would have just let himself fade away instead of forming a pact with the vampire. He really hates his E-rank luck. At least it was better being the troll's plaything instead of being Eliah's slave for the time being. He heard the vampire's voice speaking to him, breaking his stupor. Do you want me to give him that? Zelrich asked him, obviously waiting for an amusing answer to come, though it definitely irked Archer. Especially since that was something that would definitely connect him to the brown-haired boy. It might even be possible for the boy to be connected to him through the dream cycle, should he agree of giving that to the boy he met. Do what you want, you goddamn vampire. He disappeared in his spirit form as he left, not waiting for the vampire's answer. The vampire just chuckled as he spoke out to no one. I see. It would certainly be amusing to see two fakers fighting each other. But that's boring as well. I wonder what should I do? He stated in a mirthful tone as he started laughing boisterously. Prove it. If you prove your medal of being a hero is true, then perhaps we'll meet again someday. That moment, I will test your convictions, and if you fail, accept that heroes never exist. Ah ha ha, a brown-haired boy wearing a black sportswear could be seen panting harshly. His whole body was sweating, and his hands were placed on his knees as he was adjusting and regulating his breathing, trying to bring down his breathing pace back to normal. After a few seconds as he was able to control his breathing, he immediately continued his sprinting pace around the town of Kuo, running as he was trying to fill in his quota of 1 hour running. He already finished his daily regimen of push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. All he needed to finish was the running exercise he imposed on himself. There would still be about 20 minutes remaining on his timer as he looked on his wristwatch. He never stopped sprinting until he reached back to his home, filling his remaining time. When he reached his house, he immediately took a towel from the bench at the front of his house he prepared earlier to dry off his sweat, which was covering his whole body. As he moved to the doorstep, he opened it quickly as he started rushing towards the shower. But before he could do so, his mother called out to him, Issei. You're going to be late for school if you don't leave in 15 minutes. She called out on Issei as the sound of plates clanging together could be heard. I know, Mom. He replied in a loud voice as he started taking off his clothes inside the shower room. He heard his mother answered back. At least eat breakfast before you leave. His mother reprimanded him in a chiding tone as he just agreed silently, turning on the shower and started cleaning himself. 10 minutes later. One could see a cheerful expression plastered at Issei's face as he was eating with his mother, who sighed knowingly before starting a conversation with him. Let me guess, you hit your 3-year mark, haven't you? She asked Issei, who just nodded back instead of answering. He was eating toasted bread before devouring it all as he gave his response. I did, Mom. I can feel the effects of my training menu. Even though it's not much, at least it's a good start for me. Issei replied in a nonchalant tone as he took a cup of milk, drinking it before standing up. After doing so, he took his bag as he started to rush to the doorstep, intent on not being late to school. When he finished putting his shoes, he opened the door as he left, but not at least before saying goodbye to his mother. It has been 7 years ever since he met the silver-haired man. And after making a silent promise to the man, Issei decided to improve himself in many ways he can. At first, he helped people as much as he wanted and as much as he can, from helping old people crossing the streets to feeding stray cats in the alleyways. But that changed after he realized that he needed not only to help people, but to save them as well. He was 14 when he started his training menu. He wanted to improve his body. He knew himself that he cannot do impossible things like those in movies and animes, so the most he could do was to improve in any way he can, so that he could help and save people. It doesn't matter if he would only be able to help a few people. He would just have to show the silver-haired man how much determination he held to becoming a hero. If there was one thing he hated, it would be when someone mocks his goal of being a hero. That's why he kept it a secret. While he might even be proud for it to the point where he used to gladly gloat and boast loudly, he hated it if someone would make fun of his goal. He didn't dream of becoming a hero, he'll become a hero, damn it. So why do someone always insults his goal? Well, when he realized that declaring it would just make others think of him like a child, he stopped telling anyone. Just like what he said at the silver-haired man, he'll just have to show everyone he'll really become a hero. In the corner of his eye, he saw a weird old man with a weird cosplay making his way towards Issei. After a few seconds, he completely halted his steps as he stopped in front of Issei, blocking him of his direction towards the school. "What do you want, old man?" Issei spoke in a somehow miffed voice as he looked at the weird cosplayer obstructing his way. The old man just grinned mischievously as he replied. "Well, I heard that you want to become a hero. It's not really a secret since I was loud in my childhood. So what's that got to do with you?" Issei asked the old man who was just stroking his beard in a refined manner. "You see, I have this objects called class cards." He reached on the inside of his coat as he revealed a card holder. In the card holder, there are 7 cards with different characteristics. They can give you supernatural abilities that would help you become a hero. Issei just looked at the old man suspiciously as he spoke. "I see." Issei nodded in response. "So, you're a swindler." He pointed at the weird old man rudely with a scrutinizing gaze. "What a rude boy." He gasped mockingly as he moved a hand on his mouth just to prove his point. "But I'm not lying, boy. I can give you one of these cards for free, you just need to choose." "Fine, I'll humor you, old man. Let's just get this over with." Issei crossed his arms as he decided to listen to the suspicious talk the old man will make. "I'm glad for that, boy." He ignored the rude way of speaking as he just continued. "Then, I'll explain this first one." He divulged the first card which had a knight at the center of the card. This is the saber class. Sabers are those who are masters in using swords. They are known to be powerful melee warriors. Okay, people like King Arthur and Child Mordred. Issei just nodded in response. "I'm glad you understand." He revealed the second card with a bowman in the center of it. This is the archer class. Archers are those who are excellent in using bows and arrows with their flawless eyesight. So, guys like Robin Hood and Arash. Issei replied, which made the old man raised an eyebrow. "You know who Arash is?" The old man inquired of him. "Of course, I've read most of the history books now, though I also read legends and mythologies." Issei stated confidently, which was ignored by the old man. "I don't care, we'll move on the next one." Issei's eyebrow twitched in response, but he did his best not to show his irritation. The old man just exposed a third card which had a man who was wielding a lance. This is the Lancer class. Lancers are those who have wielded spears to ungodly levels with agility unmatched by most people. Oh. The most I know are those of Celts, Diarmuid with his gay Dirg, along with gay Buid and Cuchulain with his gay Bolg. Issei gave his reply in which the old man retorted. "Boy, I don't need your useless trivia, so shut up and listen to me." Another eyebrow twitched and tick marks started to appear at Issei's head, but he calmed down his growing temper as he watched the old man reached for the fourth card. This is the rider class. Riders are those warriors who fight along with their mounts. They have unrivaled skill when it comes to riding. He introduced the fourth card as Issei replied. "I can't remember anyone besides Bellerophon who rode the Pegasus." The old man just laughed at Issei's reply. That action only added to Issei's anger. "Quite close, boy. I thought you read most legends now." The old man asked in mock confusion as Issei was clenching his fist from irritation. "I swear to God, one more and I'll leave this senile bastard alone." Moving on, this card is the Berserker class. Berserkers are those warriors who have lost their sanity and became enraptured in madness. Those people who have lost their sanity, huh? Issei muttered as he placed a hand on his chin, trying to think of anyone famous who had become insane. Caligula of Rome and possibly Heracles who was cursed by Hera. That's right. Next is the Caster class. He held out the fifth card as he continued. Casters are those people who uses magic and had become famous because of their use of it. Jeanne d'Arc who was persecuted as a witch and Merlin who helped King Arthur became king, right? Issei half-stated half-asked reluctantly since he was not sure about Jeanne d'Arc, which made the old man grin mischievously. Boy, Jeanne d'Arc was not one, even though she was called a witch. Your view on witches is surely warped, isn't it? He grinned mockingly at Issei. That action only caused Issei to blow up as he spoke to him. I'm done with this old man. He turned his back from the old man and tried to start walking away. Keyword, tried. The old man grabbed his shoulders as he spoke to Issei. Don't be like that, boy. We're at the last card. Humor this old man and let him finish, okay? He smiled at Issei, which only made Issei to sigh tiredly as he replied. Fine, but don't piss me off for the last time, you senile bastard. Unfortunately for him, Issei was ignored once again as the old man just took the last card from the card holder as he uncovered it. This boy is the last card, Assassin class. Assassins are those who operate with subtlety, those who kill stealthily and such. Jinki and possibly Hassan Isaba since his community became known as assassins later on. Anyway, why would I have the need for assassin if I were to become a hero? Isn't that contradictory? Issei asked curiously as he wondered as to why he would need that. Unfortunately for him, he was utterly ignored by the old man, and the old man just ignored the heated glare Issei was sending him. Now boy, choose. Which of the 7 cards do you want? He spoke gleefully as he opened his arms in a welcoming manner. Truth be told, the deal's too suspicious. Most of the stories he'd read with something like this always had a bad outcome. Look at Achilles, he gained invulnerability and he thought he was one. Unfortunately for him, his heel was actually a major weakness of him. Another one is Siegfried, he was drenched in the blood of the dragon he slayed, Fafnir only for a leaf to cover a small part of his back, which became a weakness later on. No thanks old man. Your swindling cover is quite good, but I recommend you only use it for those who dreams to become heroes. I'm an exception to that, though. You should just trick a child, since they're easier to be swindled. Issei just started walking away as he passed through the old man's side. The old man who was just standing there looked at the boy who was walking away as he asked him seriously. What if I am saying is true? What if these cards will give you abilities that'll let you become a hero? To be honest, he only wants to use the things he was born with and work hard obtaining something new instead of gaining them the easy way. A hero works hard after all. Issei looked back, turning his head as he told his response at the old man. Don't need it. I'll become a hero on my own. Like they said, no pain no gain. That only put the old man in contemplation. Are you sure? The old man tilted his head in response. Yeah, you can do what you want with those cards instead of giving it to me. Issei replied. Are you sure? Like what I told you old man. Are you sure? Yeah. Issei's patience was getting thin for every single time the senile bastard asks him. Are you sure? Yes. Issei was gritting his teeth at the annoyance who was talking behind him. One more, just one more, and I'll blow up right in front of his face. Are you sure? Funk you. Stop pissing me off, you bastard. Issei screamed out on him as he held both of his hands in front of the old man, lifting both of his middle fingers as he cursed him. Ha 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 ha. Don't be like that. I was only asking. The old man spoke in a joyous tone as he continued, ignoring the furious scowl plastered at Issei's face. All of your counterparts accepted when I offered those cards. I wonder why you are so different from the others. He casually stated as he stroked his beard in a sagely way. You're even more interesting than your other counterparts. I hope you provide enjoyment like no any other. With that he disappeared completely. There was nothing at his previous spot. It was as if he wasn't even there to begin with, or perhaps he was taken by the wind. Issei blinked twice when he saw that. Funkin' coffee. I must have been hallucinating because of that. He just started walking away from there as he went towards his school. Little did he know that he did not even drink any coffee, or that people only started swarming after the old man left the road. Issei was walking listlessly when he heard a large clang. And when he caught a glimpse of the school, he saw the Kuo Academy with its gate closed. But most of all, he saw a black-haired girl with a superior smirk on her face just past the gates. She was looking directly at him, her arms crossed, and her smug grin was intended for him. Issei just gave a sigh as he slowly approached the school with its gates closed. When he reached the gate, the black-haired girl spoke to him. You're late just after the day you were announced as rank 1 in the school. Did you think that the teachers would be lenient on the top student? She never let her smirk drop as she just opened a small portion of the gate, letting Issei come in. No. I was late because of my daily training, not because I was lazy or something. He spoke at a defeated tone as he continued. So, I'll be getting a detention then. He just gave another sigh as he saw the look of enjoyment at the black-haired girl's eye. Let's finish this, Sauna Kaichu. Sauna Shitori, the student council president of the Kuo Academy, a third-year student who holds the place of the rank 1 on the school. At least it was until he took her place of being the top student. She has black bob-cut hair and wears eyeglasses and the standard Kuo Academy girl's uniform. At first, she was civil to him to the point where they talk sometimes, and one time, she even invited him to become a student council member. He declined though. But that changed when he was placed as the top student. When they looked at the rankings yesterday, she gave a strained smile at him when she realized she was no longer the top student and she quickly left, leaving Issei. He never really intended to become the top student. He was just studying like normal. Even he was shocked when it was him with the top student. Sure, he was expecting to be on the top 10 students, but he didn't expect to become the number 1. No way in hell he wanted that. It even became a controversy when rumors spread, saying he toppled the queen's place and such. He became the top student, he reached his 3-year mark in training. In exchange, Sona became a little bit hostile and urged a rivalry with him. Why is his luck so low to the point where it was so abysmal? Is it the requirement for wanting to become a hero? Is that it? That's right. Heracles was so unlucky since he was cursed by Zeus's wife. Jeanne d'Arc was persecuted, being called a witch. Robin Hood was branded as a criminal, when in truth, he was helping poor people. Are heroes human beings condemned to abysmal luck? Does that mean he'll become a hero as well? He just shook his head as he tried to clear those thoughts away from his mind, since thinking like that might just jinx him one day. He really didn't want to think that his luck would be so low. Troublesome. He muttered quietly as he silently cursed his bad luck. It didn't go unheard from Sona's eyes. She just gave a smile at him as she spoke. The top student should be showing that he follows the rules, right? She looked at him expectantly as she continued. Then, he wouldn't mind getting punished for being late. She smirked triumphantly at him as he just groaned in response. God damn it. I really have abysmal luck, don't I? It was after the second period that Issei was finally able to leave the student council room. He would be helping the student council in some of their duties as punishment for being late. When Sona said that the top student must set example, he didn't expect that it was really true. Even the teacher said to him that he will help the student council for a short period of time. There were still 10 minutes until the start of the next period, so he wasn't in any rush. As he arrived in front of his classroom 2C, he entered the room subtly, trying to avoid the eyes of his classmates so that he won't be bombarded by questions and such. Fortunately, no one notices him as he was able to breathe a sigh of relief when he finally sat on his chair. He heard someone speaking behind of him. What punishment did you had, Issei-kun? The voice was spoken in a polite tone, and as he looked back, he saw the blonde student as he gave his reply. Not much, Kiba, just helping the student council. Kiba, the prince of the Kuo Academy, a second-year student with blonde hair, gray eyes, and a mole under his left eye, which is adorned by the female students of the school, and a member of the occult research club. Overall, he's a good guy. But apparently, he doesn't have any male friends besides Issei, due to the fact that his face somehow captivates other girls, even if those girls currently have boyfriends. He just smiled at Issei's reply as he spoke. Well, you did remove Kaichu from her place. Maybe that's why they wanted you as a helper of the South Carolina for the time being. You showed promise in the teacher's eyes. Even you, Kiba. What's next, a moniker? Issei spoke rhetorically in a sarcastic voice as he raised both of his hands in exasperation. Actually, students did give you one. Those words made Issei stop on his tracks as he looked at Kiba in disbelief. There was no way that should happen. He wasn't one to garner too much attention after all. The only word he was able to mutter was an A. Kiba could only give him a smile of pity when he saw Issei's reaction. Fraud. That's the nickname they gave you. Seeing that Issei had no reaction, he just continued. Apparently, the student said that you took the place as a top student by cheating. Since, before you were not even in the top 10 students. You were top 16 at that time, yes. But the whole student body was shocked when you suddenly rose to become the number 1 student. Counting that Kaichu was more famous than you, no wonder they thought that you cheated. Give me a break, funkin' bad luck. He muttered quietly as he just took a nap at his desk, making Kiba look at him with pity before he patted Issei's back. It was sunset when Issei and Kiba was walking from the music store, since Issei always liked listening to music. Kiba invited him after the classes just ended for a simple celebration of his being a top 1 student of whole Kuo Academy, so he accepted, seeing that he didn't have anything to do. They were in the bridge which was located just near the school when a black-haired girl with an unknown uniform approached Issei slowly. That made the two stopped on their tracks and waited for the black-haired girl to speak. Hi to Issei-kun, are you going out with someone right now? The girl fidgeted with a red face as she asked her question. That made Issei a little bit nervous since he didn't really have that much interaction with any woman besides his mother. Kiba just narrowed his eyes at the girl with a suspicious gaze. I don't have one right now. Why are you asking? Issei just scratched his cheek sheepishly as he gave his reply. Would you like to go out with me, Haidu-kun? The black-haired girl asked with a beet red face as she held out a love letter in front of him. Issei smiled as he flushed slightly before speaking. Well, I'm flattered. But to be honest, I don't know you well. Scratch that, I don't even know your name. He spoke gently at the girl, in which the girl gave a strained smile which Issei wasn't able to see. But Kiba definitely did. My name is Amano Yuma. Then, how about we get to know each other at first? She asked as she smiled innocently at Issei, who was just panicking internally because a girl was confessing at him. What was worst is that his friend was with him when he was confessed to. I don't know. I've never really had a girlfriend before. He just gave a vague response in which the girl smiled even further. Actually, it's my first as well. We'll get to know each other. She smiled before her tone turned sad. But if it didn't work, she trailed off. Issei understood what she meant, so he decided to answer. We'll have to know each other first. Issei gave his answer as he continued. And if it does work, then we'll go out. Issei smiled faintly, in which the girl immediately brightened her expression. Yeah, then from now on, I guess I'll call you Issei-kun. Her cheeks were slightly red when she spoke Issei's given name. Yeah. Issei replied as he felt his phone, which was placed in his pocket, vibrating, meaning there was a call right now. He looked at the number and saw that it was his mom. He took the phone as he quickly answered. Hello, mom. Issei made a gesture at Kiba and Yuma, saying that he'll be occupied for a while as he left. After Issei left, there was an eerie silence currently occurring in the bridge. Kiba was looking at the girl named Yuma with suspicion, and Yuma was just smiling brightly. Breaking the stemming silence, Kiba spoke. Fallen angel, what are you planning with Issei-kun? What do you mean, Devil-san? She asked worriedly. A cute expression was in her face, but Kiba ignored that. Don't play innocent with me. He spoke darkly as an underlying threat was hidden in his voice. If the fallen would harm Issei, then he would immediately attack the fallen. The fact that Issei was Kiba's only male friend in the school makes him even more important. You're wrong, Devil-san. I'm not planning anything. I really did fall in love to Issei-kun. She spoke with a smile on her face, not even caring about the unspoken threat Kiba just released. Kiba was about to argue back when Issei just returned from his previous call. Sorry about that. My mom was saying that I should go home now. Apparently, she had something important to say to me. So, I guess that this is where we'll part, Kiba. Issei spoke as he patted Kiba's shoulder before turning his attention to Yuma. Yuma-san, we'll have to exchange numbers first, then maybe we'll go to a date. Issei started pondering on his thoughts before coming to a conclusion as he asked. It is Friday today, how about Sunday? We'll get to know each other at our date. He finished, in which Yuma just beamed a smile. Sure, Issei-kun. Sunday it is. She replied cheerfully as she held out her phone, exchanging her number with Issei. Kiba, who was on the sidelines, was just looking at the exchange of the two as he saw the two finished. Issei started to speak, then, Yuma-san. We'll meet on Sunday then. After that, he started sprinting towards the opposite direction and where Kiba was headed. But before he left, he threatened the fallen in front of him. I'll be careful if I were you, fallen angel. I'll be telling my master this. Especially, since you are trespassing Ria's Gremory's territory. He turned around as he headed towards the school's direction, leaving Yuma completely alone in the bridge. Scene break. Today was the promised date Issei and Yuma. Before that, Issei was told by his mother that she would leave for about 2 weeks, so he would have to bear living alone for that duration. Kiba also told him that he shouldn't go to the promised date, which irked Issei since Kiba was being a jerk to his possible girlfriend. While he knew that Kiba was just worried about him, Kiba didn't have to be unpleasant when it comes to Yuma. So he ignored Kiba's words and decided to go to the date. So right now, he was waiting at the fountain, which was located in the plaza at 10 o'clock in the morning. He was wearing black jeans and fitted white shirt which was under a blue unzipped jacket. A woman wearing a weird cosplayer approached him as she reached out a flyer and handed it to him. Issei just took it as he decided to read its contents. We will grant you your wish. Seems fishy, what is it with suspicious deals nowadays? He spoke out loud to no one as he caught a glimpse of Yuma approaching him slowly, and he just crumpled the paper before throwing it in the trash can near him. When Yuma approached him, he stood up and he started to speak. Good morning, Yuma-san. You look good in your clothes. He complimented her when he saw a pale violet dress reaching all the way to her legs. She just smiled at the compliment as she grabbed Issei's arm, clinging to it as she interlocked her arm as well. Let's go, Issei-kun. She smiled at him as she started dragging him away. They went to many places. They went to an arcade before going to lunch. After lunch they went to clothes store and such, and even went to an amusement park. Issei really did enjoy the date. The problem was that he had a dreadful feeling creeping up on him ever since he started the date with Yuma. At first, he just shrugged it off like it was nothing, but it never left him. It was as if his instincts were saying to leave Yuma alone now. He was really wondering on whether he should have just followed Kiba's words and never went to this date. Yuma took off her own arm which was clinging against Issei as she dashed towards the fountain, twirling with a smile on her face. She was basking on the sunset when she looked at Issei expectantly as she began to speak. Issei-kun, can you do me a favor? She asked with a sweet smile on her face, which only served its purpose to unnerve Issei even more. The dreadful feeling he felt earlier increased 100-fold. It was no longer a dreadful feeling, it was a feeling where he felt nothing but fear towards the girl in front of him. He didn't know why, but his instincts were screaming that his girlfriend, Yuma, was dangerous. He kept his cool as he just gave a strained smile towards Yuma. As long as it's something I can do. I see. Then, would you die for me? When she said that, it felt as if the atmosphere changed from a relaxed one to a life-threatening one. He could feel it. Yuma began leaking animosity and malice which was all directed to him. Issei could feel his skin being pricked by 1,000 needles as he started to sweat nervously. Can you repeat that, Yuma-san? He asked skeptically, in which Uma just smiled disturbingly. Would you die for me? At that moment, he saw the girl in front of him changed. Literally, she changed. Her body became sexier and alluring, even her clothes changed from the simple dress earlier to a Bonbeep suit. She even had angel wings, though it was black. But most of all, her smile changed from an innocent one to a cruel one. The weird thing that happened even further was that a pink energy materialized in Yuma's right hand as it started to shape itself into a spear. Yuma smiled cruelly as he saw the spear being hurled at his direction, aimed at his stomach. His reflexes started to kick in as he barely dodged the incoming projectile by rolling sideways. Oh? You were able to dodge my spear. How would you fare with two then? She asked rhetorically as two spears formed in both of her hands this time. They were even slightly bigger than the last one. She fired the two spears simultaneously, targeting the left and right leg of Issei. She was throwing it with even more power than the last time. Even so, Issei felt like he could dodge both of the spears. His instincts told him to back away immediately, and immediately he did so. The two spears hit the ground, leaving nothing but a smoking crater in its wake. The destruction made Issei shivered as he saw another spear being hurled at him, aimed directly at his head. In which he quickly ducked and heard a large boom behind him. Looking back, he only saw the trees falling as they were destroyed by the spear of light. His stupor was broken when he felt a searing pain in his stomach. It was as if his insides were burning completely. His bones were heating up, his muscles were being charred, and his blood was boiling hot. His blood started to spurt from his wound, and he fell onto his knees as he looked at the attacker. You're still alive. I thought that you'd die from a single hit. You're surprisingly sturdy. She ascended from the sky to the ground as she began approaching Issei slowly. The same pink energy materialized in her left hand, but this time, instead of a spear it was a sword. She continued walking towards Issei until she was only an inch away from him. I'm sorry that I had to kill you. She mocked apologized as she continued speaking. Don't hold it against me. Hold it against God for putting a sacred gear inside of you. Sacred gear, what did she mean? Issei thought in trepidation as he saw Yuma lifting the sword which was held in her left hand in the air as she steadied it on Issei's neck. Issei could feel the sword burning his skin slowly but painfully. His thoughts were halted when he saw vivid images flashing in his mind. He saw the moment he was born, when he was a child, when he became a teenager, but most of all, he saw the meeting he had with the silver-haired man. He promised that moment. He knew deep within his consciousness that he'll meet the man again. And he'll prove how much he wants to become a hero. So he won't die right now. He refuses to die right now, at least not until he has proven his determination to be strong enough to become a hero. He could feel his strength returning little by little, his strength was multiplying even further than he thought. He didn't know why, but it just felt right. A burning feeling was creeping on his left hand and he heard a voice deep inside his mind. Call me. Call me. You know my name. It's inside of you. Call me. What is the name? He didn't know, yet he could feel it lingering in his mind, just waiting to be spoken. It was just at the tip of his tongue. A flashing image entered his mind. He saw a dragon. Not just any dragon, a huge dragon with insurmountable power matched by only the most powerful beings ever. The dragon was red. The dragon was strong. But most of all, he felt that the dragon refused to die. He'd seen it, a symbol. Not just any symbol, it was the symbol belonging to the Welsh dragon. Yes. That's it. Call my name. Greg. Issei yelled out as his strength multiplying non-stop. His strength was becoming even stronger and stronger. Dragon booster. Iz could feel his wounds starting to heal, albeit not fast, it was not also slow. A red gauntlet which was shaped like a dragon's claw was in his left hand. Boost. 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 He heard the loud voice reverberating not only in his mind, but also in the whole park. He could feel his whole body. It was overflowing with power. He stood up. Even with the blood flowing from his wound, he ignored the pain. The fallen angel in front of him could only look at his left hand, gaping with both of her hands placed on her mouth as she started to scream at Issei. That's impossible. The boosted gear. She exclaimed as she formed a spear of light on her right hand and immediately hurled it at Issei's direction. Issei, who was just standing still, sensed the hostility coming from the spear. The spear was going at him with speed faster than most humans. He was only human, yet he was able to see the incoming projectile. In his eyes, it was slow, unbelievably slow. He knew that he could dodge that. He knew that he could tank that spear and survive. But he didn't any of the two. He let the spear rush at him. When it was almost at point blank, his hand moved faster than what most humans could achieve. In less than a second, his hand had already deflected the spear of light and it was flung back to its owner. Its speed was doubled and the owner was not able to dodge in time. Fortunately for her, instead of her heart, it was her leg that was impaled by the spear of light. The fallen screamed in pain as she fell to the ground. She was holding her leg which was penetrated by the spear with ease. All she could was glare at Issei who was approaching her slowly. In her mind, all she thought was she needed to kill the boy before he reached her. She formed another spear of light, but this time she was putting every strength and power she had just to kill the boy. It was a gambling move. If it failed, the boy would approach him, and if it succeeded she would have wounded the boy and possibly kill him. The spear, bigger, more powerful, and faster than the previous one, was thrown at him. He knew that this one could potentially kill him should he not dodge it in time. But he needed one thing: he needed to make a point at the fallen in front of him that he would not let himself be killed. He would stand if he was to fall down. He would kick if he were to lose his arms. He would crawl if he were to lose his legs. He would do anything just to become what he had always yearned for: a hero. Its speed could rival most Devil Knights. Its size could be at 5 feet. Yet it was grabbed by the dragonic gauntlet. He could feel the scorching heat produced by the spear as he grabbed it. Even if he had the boosted gear as an added protection, he could feel the intensity of the spear. Then, there was that voice again, coming from his hand. Boost. His strength was multiplied again. This time, he didn't felt the heat from the spear. The boosted gear not only increased his speed and power, it also increased his endurance. In that instant, the spear that was held in his hands, he crushed it. The pink spear of light was broken as if it was nothing but fragile glass. The shards of the spear started to dissipate as the spear was no more. He saw the look on the fallen's face. It was a look of despairing and hopelessness. She saw her last hope being destroyed in front of her eyes by the boy in front of him. He approached her. His steps were echoing loudly on the silent park. No sound was heard, not even the wind, except for the sound of his footsteps. The two were only less than a meter away. He only looked at the fallen in front of him as he spoke. "Leave, just don't bother me again." He waited for a response, yet he found none. He repeated himself. "Leave." This time, his voice was louder. It definitely broke the fallen's haze. She looked around and saw him in front of her. She nodded reluctantly as she stood, wincing in pain from her leg as she started flapping her wings as she flew towards the moonlight, disappearing in his sight. It was midnight when he got home. His vision was blurry, and his body was broken as he made his way towards his house. It was his first fight. He never even had any fight against any delinquents. So technically, it really was his first fight. He opened the door and he immediately closed it back when he entered. "I'm really lucky that Mom's not here. She'll think that I got into a fight that almost got me killed." "Well, I did really almost get myself killed." Issei chuckled at his joke as he made his way towards the shower room. He needed to do nothing more than to rinse the blood from his body. Each step was hard, his body was groaning in pain. Even though he had trained himself in the past, the being he fought was something above humans themselves. Unfortunately for him, he was only human. Even so, he ignored his sore body as he opened the sliding door of the shower room. His wounds were healing faster than a human could achieve. He turned the shower on as he let himself get doused by the hot water. He could feel his wounds being soaked by the hot water. He could only wince from the pain as he started cleaning himself. He decided to think things later as he just enjoyed the water drenching his whole body. He took a glass of milk inside the fridge as he quickly sat in a chair of the dining table. There was no one else, only him and him alone. He really needed to think things through. He was definitely not hallucinating. Even now, he could feel the pain surging from the wound throughout his whole body. Seeing that there was no one in the house besides him, he voiced out his thoughts. Just what the hell happened back there? He really didn't expect an answer to come, especially on his left hand. You defeated a fallen angel back there, quite an accomplishment for someone who never fought his entire life. He saw a green light being emitted in the back of his hand. The green light was somehow similar from the red gauntlet he used earlier. Now thinking about it, how did the gauntlet even disappeared? Because I willed it. The green light was emitted again. It seems that whenever the voice talks, the green light would appear in his left hand. "Who are you?" Issei asked a voice that was being released from his hand. "You already called me earlier." "Dreg?" As in the Welsh dragon. Issei asked in assurance only to be met with a snarky reply. "No, I'm Shenron, the dragon you always watch on that silly TV show of yours." The voice was sarcastic, unbelievably so. That retort only made tick marks appear in Issei's head, but he calmed himself down. "Of course I'm Dreg, you fool. I happen to have a good host, but he's unexpectedly dense." Issei ignored the rude comment as he asked again what happened earlier. "Can you tell me what happened earlier? I somehow can't remember all of it." Issei asked as he held out a hand on his temple, trying to calm down his incoming headache. "Do I have to repeat myself?" Issei wasn't really at the mood to bicker with someone. What he needed right now was answers. "Fine, the girl you dated was actually a fallen angel in disguise. She wanted to kill you because a sacred gear was inside you." "I see. Then what is a sacred gear?" please no snarky comments. I need answers to my questions right now. Issei half demanded and half pleaded at the Welsh dragon which was residing in his hand. The sacred gear is an item with powerful abilities bestowed to humans by God. God of the Bible himself. Issei asked curiously only to be met with another snarky reply. No, the pink-haired magical girl who became God on another silly TV show you watched. Goddamn it, Drag. Stop it with the TV shows. Issei barked out in reply, only for the dragon to retaliate. Then stop asking questions you already know the answer, you fool. Issei only growled out in response, but he dismissed it as quickly as it appeared. He needed answers, even if those answers were to be snarky. I'll ask just one question, does the supernatural really exist? I told you to stop asking questions you already know the answer, you fool. Funk you, Drag. I'm just making sure. And stop calling me fool. Issei cursed at the Welsh dragon, fortunately the dragon stopped retaliating back. Am I going crazy or what? He spoke out clearly to no one, but the snarky dragon wanted to reply. I thought you were going to ask only one question. Shut it, Drag. Issei just sighed as he decided deal with the shit that happened today tomorrow, hopefully with a clear mind. Blinking once, blinking twice, Issei only groaned when he heard the sound of his alarm ringing loudly. Forcing his body to sit upright, Issei began recalling all the events that had transpired last evening, him almost getting killed by Yuma Amano, the said girl transforming into an angel with black wings, and him calling out immense power hidden deep inside of him. Perhaps it was just a dream? Issei thought out loud as he stood up, turned off the alarm, and began fixing the sheets of the bed. After he did, he opened the curtain of the window in his room as he basked in the morning light of the sun. You almost died last night, you know. Those words snapped Issei out of his thoughts as he tried to remember the voice. When the image of a gigantic western dragon with red skin and scales suddenly flashed inside of his mind, he recalled the name of the dragon. Issei could only sigh in response as he gave out a reply. And you're such a prude, you know. The sound of a snarl akin to that of a beast echoed in his mind, which meant that Drake was mad at his simply remark. Still, Issei couldn't help but be a little bit frustrated at his current situation. Sure, he was hoping for a change in his life, especially if it would be related to something altruistic. But he did not expect to be fighting a Thotobi figure in the Bible. Unfortunately, Drake saw it fit to ruin his conclusion of all events last night being a dream. Although, he knew that he was just spouting nonsense about last night being a dream, especially so when he felt his body still sore from his first fight, he still wanted to think that everything that had happened was not true. Sorry to burst your bubble. But with you awakening boosted gear, your life will never be the same. Letting out a sigh of frustration, he never responded as he took his school uniform out of his wardrobe and began wearing it. After he finished doing so, he left the room and headed downstairs. His mother was not in the house right now, so it would be up to him to cook his own breakfast. Drake, can you explain to me about supernatural in general? The dragon only scoffed in response. Nevertheless, Drake complied and began explaining everything to know about the supernatural, saying that his host needed to be knowledgeable since Issei needed to gain every advantage he could. Drake clearly stated that even with his strength due to his training, it wasn't still enough to fight against the higher tier beings in the supernatural world. Issei interjected when Drake was explaining about mythological creatures, more specifically when Drake mentioned Samuel being a dragon and angel hybrid instead of an archangel. Something similar popped in his mind, and his curiosity led him to ask about it. What about the beast of Revelation, the beast from the earth, the beast from the sea? Unfortunately, Drake didn't even answer his question and ignored it, as if he didn't even ask about it in the first place. Well, Issei tried bringing the subject back, but the dragon was skillfully avoiding the topic and he decided to give up. When Drake finished explaining about the various pantheons, from the Norse to the Greeks and Hindu gods, the dragon then began on explaining things about the sacred gear and its functions, the 13 Longinus, few notable sacred gears that had been discovered and such. After that, Drake began explaining the functions of the boosted gear, one of the 13 Longinus where the Welsh dragon's soul and power has been sealed in. A sacred gear being able to double the user's power for every 10 seconds. Drake also stated that should he go balance breaker, it would be possible to break that limitation and use the boost without waiting. Although, Drake said that transforming into balance breaker would drain his stamina rapidly. For some reason, Drake was hiding something important. Issei noticed that subtle pause the dragon gave when the dragon started with a Jew, but Drake stopped himself continuing. Right now, because of his training, Issei could go for a balance breaker easily, and since his stamina was very high, it would take at least hours before the transformation disappear, even if he was to go full power from the beginning. Although he was still inexperienced in the usage of his new power, he was going to train himself for that. Drake had stated that the only reason he lost was against Amano Yuma was because he was relatively new to the notion of fighting and the fact that he was unprepared for it. Now that he could use the boosted gear, Drake had stated it was not impossible for him to defeat high-class devils and angels. Drake had even stated that due to his training, there was a chance of him winning against an ultimate class devil. Issei was truly glad he decided to train himself in a ridiculous but effective manner. Seriously, who would have thought of doing 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, 50 squats, 1 kilometer running every single day, in the morning and in the evening, even if there was a thunderstorm or heavy rain. Only him. Despite the advantages of being the new psychopathic, as Drake called him, the fact that he had a predestined fight with an unknown person perturbed him. He also did not like the fact that it was a fight to death, something that Drake clearly implied to him and told him to not lose against the White One. But that begs the question, what would happen to his mom right now? Would she be involved in his affairs, either as collateral damage or hostage to get to him? Drake stated that his life would never be the same, and Issei agreed. The fallen angel tried to kill him despite the fact that his sacred gear was still unknown, but now that it was actually a Longinus, the boosted gear to be exact. Many would go after his power, either to kill him to ensure such power don't exist for a long period of time, or perhaps even take it for themselves. His mother would no longer be safe for as long as he was with her. She might no longer be safe by simply being his mother. Even if she was to leave the country, people who discovered his relation to her might harm her just to get to him. Dealing with this kind of shit in the morning was giving him a migraine. He just hoped that no problems would arise too soon. What's the worst that could happen? Hey Drake, when I said those words earlier, I jinxed myself, didn't I? Drake was still roaring in laughter inside of his mind, not even stopping for a short breathe. Right now, Issei was rubbing his forehead and exasperation was clear on his face as he stood in front of the door of his classroom. Thankfully, he had yet to enter the room and he was now reluctant to do so. Who wouldn't? After all, inside of the room, he heard the teacher declared something ridiculous and simply unbelievable. Who the hell is spreading news about me no longer being alive? Apparently, he was dead. Or at least the teacher on the other side of the door said so. Even Drake thought it was funny, roaring out a loud laugh, which only intensified the feeling of annoyance Issei had right now. When Issei felt someone's presence creeping up behind him, he immediately turned around and took a couple of steps back. The person was a girl, a third-year student in Kuo Academy to be precise. She was donning the usual school uniform of Kuo Academy meant for girls. Her straight black hair flowed all the way down to her knees. Underneath her split bangs were her light brown eyes, peering through her semi-rimmed glasses. Tsubaki Shinra, the vice president of Kuo Academy Student Council. Issei gave a respectful nod as he spoke to her. What can I do for you, Shinra Fukakechu? Haidu-san, how many times do I have to tell you that I prefer being called Tsubaki? Shrugging his shoulders, Issei rolled his eyes. I don't know, perhaps when you decide to call me Issei, instead of Haidu. When he didn't get an immediate response, Issei continued speaking. So, what can I do for you, Fukakechu? Haichu would like to have a talk with you. Tsubaki stated in her indifferent tone, but Issei knew better. Testing his assumption for a while, he asked a question. About what? Unfortunately for Issei, his question was ignored as the vice president turned around, her back in front of him as she began walking away. Follow me, Haidu-san. Sighing in annoyance, Issei began following her reluctantly. Summons from the president could only mean two things: he violated a rule and committed an offense, or he had an achievement worth noting for the sake of the school's prestige. But to be honest, Issei thought none of those two. Instead he thought of a third option. No one would have said that he was dead unless it was someone who had enough power to influence the school. Of course it would be the one who holds the position as the president of the student council. They knew that he was being targeted by a fallen and they didn't even do anything, much less say something. Still, he didn't want to jump into conclusions that easily. After all, he treated the president as a friend. For someone like him who didn't have many friends, much less acquaintances, he did not want to lose a friend all because of an assumption. After a minute or two of walking, they finally reached the doorstep of the student council's office. Tsubaki opened the door and led Issei inside. As Issei entered the room, he couldn't help but get a little bit perplexed at the interior design of the room. It almost looked the same as a normal office. Two bookshelves were lined up behind the president's desk, tiles of black and brown encompassed the floor, and several desks were neatly aligned in a reverse U position, with the president's desk at the middle. Oh yeah, there was also a big, high-class chandelier hanging from the ceiling, perfectly normal for a student council office to have that. Sitting in the president's desk was Shitori Sauna, with her patent facet of indifference on her face. He could also see two more people sitting on the desks on the side, a white-haired girl and a boy having a pale brown hair. Unlike the girl who was giving Issei a nod, the boy was glaring at him hatefully, as if his existence was the bane of humanity. Momo Hanakai and Saji Genshiru, members of the student council and second-year students of Kuo Academy, just like him. While Issei never had any problems with the snow-haired girl, he had gotten off on the wrong foot with Saji Genshiro. Apparently, Saji hated him because he had gotten Sona's attention too many times and him in response merely taunted Saji. It was fun messing with someone after all. Looking back at Sona, Issei offered his thoughts. "Good morning Sona Kaichu. So, why did you call me?" Pushing her glasses up, the stern gaze Sona was giving him hardened as she spoke. "Haidu-kun, I am going to keep this brief. You fought a fallen angel, Mono last night. Are you fine now?" The somehow relaxed atmosphere in the air instantly turned tense, and Issei immediately had his guard up. His brown eyes also took notice of the fact that the two people on the side stood up, with their guards raised as if they were preparing for a fight to begin. At the corner of his eye, he saw Tsubaki guarding the door that would lead outside the room. Even Sona herself was wary, her eyes looking for any signs if Issei would react badly towards her words. Sona knew of what happened last night and the fact that Riaz was planning to take advantage of the situation to gain a new piece that will help her against her endeavor against Riser. Despite the fact that Sona was inwardly angered at the fact that Riaz was planning to manipulate Issei to her whims, she knew how desperate Riaz was. So when Riaz called last night, saying that Issei did not summon him, she was partly relieved and shocked, relieved that Riaz no longer had any chance to manipulate Issei, and shocked at the fact that Issei confronted the fallen by himself. That was why Sona thought of Issei to be dead and tried to inform his mother, which unfortunately was out of reach when she tried to call the woman's number. So, she then notified the school of what happened, distorted the truth a little, and accepted the fact that Issei was dead. Alas, Issei was actually alive and breathing. That could only mean two things: Issei managed to escape the fallen before a fight escalated, which was very unlikely in her opinion, since the fallen obviously wasn't going to let Issei go away, or he had awakened his sacred gear and defeated the fallen angel. With Riaz still not knowing that Issei was alive, Sona was going to use this to her advantage. Sona knew that she was thinking in the same lines as Riaz, but could you fault her? Sona did not want his friend to be under Riaz's rule, and she wasn't going to mistreat him in any way or form. After all, Sona befriended Issei with the thought of simply wanting a human friend, not because he possibly, now confirmed, have a sacred gear. There was a function called trade in the evil pieces system, so she could help Riaz and regain Issei after Riaz's struggle. In her opinion, it was like killing 3 birds with a single stone. She helped Riaz and helped Issei not being manipulated by Riaz and gained a sacred gear user. Of course she was going to make Issei consider becoming a part of her peerage, she was not going to forcefully turn Issei into a servant of hers. Doing so will only break the level of trust they have. Tapping her desk once with her pen, Issei's attention was now on Sona. "Do not give me that look, Haidu-kun. I am merely concerned for you as a friend." The atmosphere returned to its previous state as Issei breathed a sigh of relief. He never detected any lies in her soft-spoken words. It felt genuine and Issei knew that Sona was truly concerned for him. Still, he needed to know how they knew he fought a biblical figure last night. As if Sona knew Issei's question, she immediately gave a reply. "Haidu-kun, Kuo town itself is my friend's territory. That person knows every single thing that happens in this town and just simply gave the information to me. It was the truth, albeit a vague one." Riaz really owned the territory and she knew most of the events that transpire in the place. Riaz even gave her the information that Issei did not summon Riaz, so all of her words were the truth. Issei narrowed his eyes at the mention of Sona's friend. "Can I ask who this friend of yours is?" This was the decision she was really contemplating. Issei was an intelligent and a very sharp person when it came to matters like this. If she was to give Riaz's name to Issei, there was no chance of Issei not knowing Riaz tried to exploit his situation. After a few seconds had passed by, Sona asked her question. "Before I answer your question, can you tell me what do you plan after knowing her name?" "So the person's a she. Thank you for that slip-up of yours, Sona Kaichu. That narrows the person down to 10, unless she's a friend outside of the school." When Issei noticed the looks directed to him, he shrugged. "How do I know she's in Kuo?" "Easy, someone who governs a territory won't leave it unattended." The 3 people beside Sona were looking at Issei in shock, while the school president herself was cursing for unknowingly giving up a clue. "And judging from their reactions, she's in Kuo," Issei pointed out as he continued. Shinra Fukakechi or any of the other female members of the student council obviously aren't the ones who own Kuo. Even Himejima Senpai and Taoju-san are out of the list. So it's either Abe Senpai or Gremory Senpai who owns Kuo, am I correct? Issei never received any response, but the widening of Saji's eyes was enough. His assumption was correct. It slightly hurt him to know that Sona protected her friend instead of outright saying her name. Issei wanted to talk with the person, more so since that person obviously knew that there was a fallen angel in her territory, but did nothing to stop her from trying to kill him. Although, what he hated the most was her manipulation. Abe-senpai's family is a famed family of animal trainers. Her renowned father is working as a circus animal trainer, while her mother is a famed zoologist and trainer in Wellington Zoo. It's obvious that they're rich but unlikely to be the ones who owns a town where supernatural occurs. No one replied, but he didn't care. Issei felt like a detective for once, and he was going to act like one. He already knew who the friend was, seeing that her surname was deeply tied as one of the 72 demons of Solomon. Gremory senpai's family is not much known, except for the fact that they live in Europe and is obviously rich. Still, don't you think it's too much of a coincidence for a girl bearing the name of one of Solomon's 72 demons to possibly govern a town where supernatural events transpire? The gasp that escaped Saji's lips was enough to prove his words. Also, Shitori's not a subtle name to hide your origins as a Citri demon, Saunakaichu. And don't worry about it too much, I still consider you as a friend, unless you're just disguising yourself as one. All of the members of the student council were looking at Issei in surprise and a little bit of amazement. It was Sona who first regained her composure, pushing her glasses up as she spoke. Since when did you know, Haidu-kun? To be honest, I never knew. I just assumed that you had something to do with the fact that I'm supposedly dead due to a car crash last evening. But when you mentioned the Uma Amano earlier, I knew that you had a connection with the supernatural. I'm not that intelligent, but I'm proud to say that I've read a lot of books regarding folklores, legends, myths, history and the Bible itself. It's easy to connect the dots since you don't have a lot of friends inside the school, Saunakaichu. Add to the fact that Citri and Gremory are part of the Ars Gotia. The raven-haired president just rubbed her forehead in exasperation. Not intelligent, he says. What a load of bullshit. The council members were looking disbelievingly at their president who was speaking profanities out loud. This is the reason why I told Riaz to adopt a fake surname. But the girl never listened at all. Sona muttered before returning her attention to Issei. While most of your assumptions are correct, there is a simple thing that you have mistaken. Issei simply raised his eyebrows, and Sona continued. Our kind is called a devil, instead of demon. The two are different types of existence. And don't worry about our kind devouring a human soul. We no longer delve on those types of actions. Sona stated, not wanting Issei to think of anything negative that might lead to misunderstandings. She knew that Issei wanted to be a hero. She investigated Issei's profile when she wanted to recruit him before, it was not a secret after all. If he was to think that Sona was actually a soul-devouring entity, the friendship they had would obviously be destroyed. Issei said nothing but gave a nod instead, and the raven-haired girl continued. Anyway, now that you know the owner of Kuo Town, what will you do? That's easy to answer. I'm just going to ask a question. And if her answer did not satisfy me, know that Riaz Gremory will have to do everything just to avoid making an enemy out of the Sekyute. The sound of pen dropping reverberated throughout the student council office. Leaving all of its occupants, save for Issei to gasp in shock. Issei took that as his moment to leave. When Issei finally left the room, Tsubaki spoke. Aichu, what do you think will happen to Riasama? Sona opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the door of the student council office, revealing Issei's figure. Also, I know that even as demo Issei stopped and corrected himself. Devils, you would have to deal with the politics now that a new Longinus user appeared out of nowhere, but please don't tell anyone about my existence. I just plan on having a talk with Gremory senpai and make a point, not go ballistic and kill her. In exchange, I'll owe you one favor you can use whenever you want, as long as it's humane and ethically moral. With that, Issei took his leave and never returned. Tsubaki looked at her king as she spoke. What will you do, Kaichu? The response Sona gave was just a rub of her forehead and a groan. Thankfully, she befriended Issei with the thoughts of merely being friends, not because of an assumption of him having a sacred gear. She was not on Issei's blacklist, which she was truly glad at. She did not want an enemy known as the Sekyute. The sound of the school bell resounding throughout the whole school could be heard, indicating that classes had ended. Issei was packing all of his things when Kiba approached him, with a slightly nervous expression. Issei-kun, are you sure nothing happened to you? You're such a worrywart, Kiba. Nothing bad happened to me yesterday, except for my incompatibility with Amano-san. A small smile made its way on Kiba's lips when he heard of those words. But he was now convinced that Issei had a sacred gear. It was not possible for Issei to have escaped the fallen angel unless he had a tool to help him do so. Can I ask a bit of your time, Issei-kun? Don't worry, it won't take long. It would be just for a few minutes. Inwardly, Issei was now judging his friend with a slight hint of suspicion. Despite the fact that they were friends, it was Kiba who approached and befriended him in the first place. Since Issei often isolated himself away from his other classmates, Kiba gave it a try to befriend him, seeing that he himself was being isolated by most of the boys, and he himself was only acquainted with girls. Who knows, perhaps Kiba befriended him with the thought of recruiting a sacred gear user for his master. Despite the fact that he was still lacking a bit of knowledge in the underworld and its inhabitants, Drake had told him about evil pieces, something that he should avoid at all costs if he wanted to retain his humanity. If his assumption towards Kiba's thoughts actually happened to be true, that fact might put a rift on their friendship. Hopefully, he was wrong since he did not want to lose few of his friends in the school just because of this event. Issei gave a smile as he stood up. I don't have much to do anyway. What are we doing? Well, but I mean Ria-senpai wants to talk to you. Meeting the mysterious and beautiful third year of Kuo Academy, Ria's Gremory. What are you waiting for? Let's go then. Issei spoke in a cheerful tone that would leave Sona's sister jealous, and it made Kiba a little bit worried. He knew for a fact that Issei was never a cheerful person. He just hoped that Issei's meeting with Ria's would go without any problems. Kiba shook those thoughts out of his head. Issei was an understanding person with a personality similar to that of an altruist, and his master was a kind person who would love her servants unconditionally. They were both kind people, so it was obvious that nothing bad would happen. Yes, nothing would go wrong. Of course Kiba's thoughts were proven wrong when Ria stepped out of her shower and smiled at Issei indulgently. Issei's response was a snort followed by a scoff as he sipped on the tea given to him by Akeno. When Ria's finished changing and sat in opposite of Issei, a smile graced her visage. Issei immediately noticed something different on her smile. It was a fake one, or rather a forced one, as if she did not like the idea of smiling right now. It was a smile that was clearly but an expression of being civilized, something she did not like doing herself. A single thought crossed his mind. He did not like the woman known as Ria's Gremory. Her hair tinted with a shade of crimson, reached all the way down to her thighs, and a single strand sticking out from the top of her head. Despite the fact that her figure was hidden underneath the school uniform she was dressed in, Ria's Gremory had a very buxom figure. Even when faced with the beauty she had, Issei never even lusted at her, much less continued to look at her body. He merely observed her for a split second. Right now, Issei's attention was solely directed in her blue-green eyes, which were calculating his very existence, something that angered him. Ria's was looking at him as if he was the most suspicious person to have existed, when it was him who should be doing that. Giving a faux smile, Issei began speaking in an obviously fake cheerful tone. So, what can I do for you, Gremory-senpai? I know that you're interested in folklores and mythology. So Haidu-kun, I would like to extend an invitation for you to become a member of the Occult Research Club. Mentally, Issei scoffed. The idea of becoming a servant of someone who just planned on turning him into one forcefully was not so appealing. More so that he knew the girl planned on letting him die and make him think that Ria's Gremory was his hero. Gremory-senpai, unfortunately, I do not have enough time for club activities. That is why I rejected Sona Kaichu's offer about becoming a part of student council before. It was a good save, especially since he was actually employed as a part-timer, working as an assistant of an archaeology professor teaching in Kuo Academy College Division. His mother just wanted him to take a 2-week leave for God knows why. Although, Issei mused when he saw Ria's eyebrows twitching slightly, as if she had been annoyed at the notion of him rejecting her offer, or perhaps something different. Issei didn't know and he hardly cared. In actuality, Ria's was annoyed at Issei's flat-out rejection of her offer, but more so at the fact that she had just known that Sona was actually pinning for Issei before. Sona knew her circumstances and the reason why she needed to complete her peerage as fast as she could, yet her best friend was actually planning to take one who she had taken an interest at. Ria's just shook her head in disappointment, knowing that this conversation won't be going anywhere. If Issei rejected Sona, who was his friend, Issei would definitely reject someone he hardly knew. And so, she decided to proceed to the main point of the discussion. I want to know, Haidu Issei. How did you survive an encounter with a fallen angel? After he finished sipping on his tea, Issei placed it back on the table as he spoke, confusion filling his voice. What are you talking about, Gremory-senpai? That was the last straw. It was surprisingly easy to break Ria's Gremory's facade than he thought. The smile on her face was gone, and now she was looking serious, anxiety, and a hint of authoritative tone could be traced on her words. Haidu Issei, answer my question. Every occupant of the room tense, Issei even heard Kiba cursing Murphy's Law as a look of contemplation appeared on his face. Kiba did not know who to support in this conversation. Kiba knew that what his master tried to do was devious and intolerable since Issei was his friend. Why should I, to prove your assumption of me having a sacred gear? Issei asked sarcastically as he observed Ria's Gremory. The crimson-haired woman was now looking at him warily, but Issei could hardly care. When he had heard from Drake as to how the evil pieces functioned, it enraged him. No, I am not going to answer your question. In fact, you should be answering mine. You knew that I was going to die on the hands of the fallen angel, why did you let me confront her then? Why didn't you do anything to stop it, much less inform me about it? The silence on the occult research clubroom was so thick no one dared to speak. If you can't even recall Haidu Issei, Yudo warned you about the girl, yet you foolishly believed none of his words. Rhea spoke coldly, but Issei merely gave another faux smile as he clapped his hands and closed his eyes for a short moment. When he opened it, his gaze fell onto Kiba. Yes, my friend Yudo Kiba-san did warn me about her. In fact, I also have a question for you, Kiba-san. Kiba cringed at the honorific suffix Issei inserted in his name, proving his theory that Issei was angry at the current situation. Nonetheless, Kiba still turned his attention towards his friend. Did you befriend me with the intention of recruiting me to your group of devils? Knowing that I have a sacred gear? Even though he asked, Issei did not let him speak as he returned his attention to Rias and glared at her. Still, you did not answer my question, Gremory. It was obvious that Kiba warned me on his own volition, something which you did not clearly approve. I can see it in your eyes, you know. You thought that because of his warning, there was a chance that you would lose the only opportunity you had to revive me as one of your own. Standing up, Issei continued speaking. An act that disgusts me, you greedy spawn of a devil. Now, tell me truth. My words are correct, aren't they? A sneer escaped his lips as he looked at Rias with disdain and disgust. Rias wanted to revive him as a part of her peerage, under the pretense of saving him, when in fact the truth was she manipulated the situation, so that she would come out with a prize in her hand. Rias wanted him to look at her as if she was his hero. Still, he was not angry because of those facts. What truly infuriated him was the fact that she was so selfish to the point where she would exploit a situation just to bind an innocent person to her will forcibly without even an ounce of consent. I am an altruist, Rias Gremory. And what I hate the most are those who act selfishly to satisfy themselves. You do not have the right to manipulate me. Much less control me, devil. Issei spat out, his eyes glinting with anger as he glared heatedly at Rias. Despite all of his words, it seemed that the heiress of Gremory clan only found his words to be mere words and didn't even thought of anything he said. Haidu Issei, calm yourself. Even if you are the sacred gear wielder, you're in my territory and… Fool. Kuo is not your territory, much less Japan. The Shinto pantheon only permits your kind to live here and could drive all of you away anytime. You do not have the jurisdiction here, Gremory. Or are you saying that Lucifer, a mere angel of God who had fallen from grace, can defeat Amaterasu-sama, the goddess of the sun? Issei cut her off with a more logical explanation. He did not know whether the Shinto pantheon still exists, since Drake had said that some of the old gods are already dead, but Japan was the land of their origin, he was willing to bet on it. He needed a simple fact so that he could control the whole conversation. He added a suffix of respect since he didn't want to anger a goddess, in case she actually exists. The crimson-haired teen narrowed her eyes in suspicion. You're a part of Shinto. Issei didn't even deny her words. She was free to think what she wanted, and he was only going to use it to his advantage. Let me make this clear to you, Gremory. I hold no hatred toward you, only anger. Anger at the fact that you were so selfish that you would bind someone you didn't even know to your will, forcibly and without any consent. It was obvious that Rias didn't believe her, and he could still see the look of elitism in her eyes, which made it clear to him that she was not taking him seriously. At first, he thought that the girl would believe him, which was actually false hope. No choice, plan B it is. Ria's eyes widened instantly, her skin becoming paler for every second passing by, and Issei could tell that she was shaking in fear as her blue-green eyes conveyed that she was downright terrified at Issei, as if his existence was that of a monster. The others were no better. Kaneko, who was silently watching on the sidelines, fainted from the pure draconic energy surge that he was releasing. Kiba stood stiffly, frozen like a statue as he looked at Issei with a hint of fear in his eyes. Akeno had her guard up as she observed the whole endeavor. Even though she knew that she held no chance facing off against Issei, she had to protect her king. The energy being released from Issei was so potent all of them could see the red energy taking shape, coating Issei and forming a gigantic dragon-shaped mirage behind Issei. All of them who were staring at Issei in fear saw their own deaths once their eyes met the emerald ones held by the dragon. Even though it was just a mirage, a mere illusion, the form of the dragon screamed power. They couldn't even move all because of the gaze the dragon was giving them. It was looking at them in disdain, trying to assert its dominance, practically goading all of them to kneel. Kiba could no longer take the pressure as he was forced to kneel down with one of his knees. Rias and Akeno were breathing harshly, trying to maintain their pride as they forced themselves to remain standing, which made Issei looked at them with a hint of respect. Even under the condition of being faced with an indomitable enemy, they still wanted to keep their pride intact. Even with the risks laid out and open. And then, the intense pressure disappeared. All of them slumped on the ground, with their mouths heaving sighs of relief, momentarily forgetting Issei's presence inside of the clubroom. A single step of his was enough to make all of them jolt in fear and look at Issei with wariness, watching every single one of his move, as if he was going to kill them anytime soon. Do not make me repeat myself, Gremory. The next time you do something like this, do make sure it doesn't occur in Kuo. After all, if it did, Issei didn't finish and left the threat hanging as a frantic nod from Ria's was enough to quell Issei's anger. He was not going to go ballistic all because she tried to manipulate him. No, he needed to make a point that he would not allow her to continue her dubious actions, especially in the place where he was born. With that, Issei started walking away from them and headed to the exit. As he grabbed the doorknob, he spoke. I suggest you do not report this to your higher-ups. If you do, you'll have the strongest Securitate after your trail, devil. Another thing, this only happened because you cannot control your avarice. Lastly, do not bother me, and I will not bother you. Gray eyes snapped open when the silver-haired beauty felt a hostile draconic energy sipping from the air. A feeling of anxiety rose to her before shrugging it away. Looking around, she was in the familiar town of Kuo, the town where she was once abandoned by a shitty person that was not even worthy enough to be called her father. Glancing at her side, her blade was still there, the one that was given to her by her guardian, the one even she would reluctantly admit as her surrogate father. At least the man was better than the shitty person who gave her his genes. She stood up and placed the sheath of the Nadachi on the back of her waist, and that was when she felt a pulse of energy inside of her body. She knew that her partner was calling to her. You felt it, didn't you? Yeah, and I was still waiting for at least 10 years. A pity such wish didn't happen. At least I can finally kill the red one. He shouldn't have died before our predestined fight. Curb that bloodlust of yours, Albion. It's practically seeping out of me. Even with her thoughts were said to the dragon residing on her sacred gear, the dragon ignored her. Judging from the energy, it's still weak. Albion then snorted. She knew why, and she could only do the same. It was such a pity that her rival was still green when it comes to mastering the boosted gear. Whoever the host of the Welsh dragon was, that person was still not enough to be on her level. Such a pity. She would have settled even just for a spar. Still, she was willing to wait. After all, she was the strongest Hakuryuiku to have ever existed. The Securitate not being able to match her level, the idea of fighting such person was disgusting. A manic grin graced her lips as she licked it unconsciously. Yes, she was willing to wait, even if it would take more than 50 years. Her fight with the Securitate was going to be glorious, and nothing would stop it. Strongest Securitate, my ass, stop dreaming, you fool. I told you, Drake, I'm not a fool. I just said that to make a point. I don't care. You're a fool because you let your emotions take control of you. Issei frowned as he heard Drake's word. No matter how much he wanted to refute the dragon's words, he couldn't. Drake's statement was pretty much true, and he knew how much blunder he had made. He had been told earlier that he was not yet prepared to take on stronger opponents on the level of Lucifer and such. At best, Drake told him that he could win against an ultimate class devil, using the balance breaker to its full potential and countless preparation, but would come out of the battle with life-threatening injuries. So after Drake said that Ria's Gremory was the sister of the current Lucifer, Issei realized how his plan backfired. Sirzich's Gremory, I can definitely say he's one of the strongest beings in the world. More or less 200 years ago, my host was killed by the man himself. The most terrifying thing about that man, he's a monster like no any other, and I'm sure that his cruelty can only be matched by the most dreadful evil dragons in existence. If there was by any chance that Ria's Gremory would call for her brother, Issei knew that he won't win against a Lucifer. Drake's statement was enough proof of that. If the Welsh dragon was cautious of the man, Issei knew that he should be wary as well. Add to the fact that he flared his draconic energy. It was like lighting up a signal that declared the Securitate was currently residing in Kuo. Issei just hoped that no important entity in the supernatural world felt his energy. He was not yet prepared to take on the world. It had been 3 days ever since Issei's one-sided meeting with Ria's Gremory happened. As of now, all of her servants had been avoiding him. Even Kiba was openly avoiding him, which led to several rumors that they had broken up and such. Reflecting on what happened, Issei regretted his actions. His actions not only had a very high chance of backfiring to him, it also strained his friendship with Kiba. Drake was right, he let his emotions control him. Sighing to himself, Issei grabbed a bottle of milk out of the plastic bag on his hand and began drinking on it. He was currently on the park, where ironically, the place he was assaulted by a mono-Yuuma, and it was giving him a dreadful feeling. The sunset had already passed and was now evening. The eerie silence on the park was only getting on Issei's nerves, and the fact that it was currently dark was only unnerving him even more. As he finished drinking on the bottle, he threw it on the near trash bin and started walking away from the park. Issei was feeling very tense and jumpy for some unknown reason. The feeling intensified when Issei saw a gray-haired man making his way towards him. The man was dressed in a very weird manner. It looked like the garb of a priest, yet at the same time it wasn't. but that was not bothered him. It was the grin on the man's face and the murderous glint on the man's eyes. The man was practically oozing bloodlust comparable to Oni of Mount Ooe, who almost killed him 4 days ago. Issei unconsciously took a step back when he saw a card on the man's hand. For some reason, a familiar image lingered inside of his mind. It was an old man, dressed in a fancy robe as the old man showcased several cards in front of his face. The image soon dissipated from his mind when the gray-haired man spoke. "Good evening, civilian-kun. Can I make a request?" Despite the jolly voice the man gave, it only sent shivers in Issei's spine as his eyes narrowed slightly. He could feel a small hint of energy being gathered in the card. His eyes widened when the card vanished in a flash, and the webs of coalescing lights were slowly overlapping themselves as the light became narrower for each second passing. The katana emerged from the light, its length was more or less 30 inches. 2 small orbs were attached from the string that was hanging from the pommel of the katana. Issei detected a hint of magic when he saw the small spark of purple lightning at the tip of the blade. The man placed the blunt side of the blade on his shoulder, the smirk on his face widening. "I want to test my new toy. Become my dummy, will you?" Issei sidestepped to his left as he managed to evade a strike that would have taken his heart. When he saw the sharp side of the katana struck the ground, a surge of purple lightning was sent throughout the earth. Cracks and crevices were formed when the lightning from the ground exploded, splinters and fragments were sent flying all over the park. One hit his leg, embedding itself on his thigh as he held back a scream. Looking at the one who attacked him, the man who named himself to be Fried Selzen, an exorcist who serves to destroy devils and kill all those who were associated with them. Issei didn't have any forms of training besides body conditioning. So even if he was to fight someone right now, the best he could do was to kick, punch and evade all of their attacks. As much as Issei wanted to use the boosted gear, he held back from doing so. The disadvantage he held right now against the exorcist was his slow mobility, thanks to the goddamn splinter on his thigh. Using the boosted gear right now would cost him the element of surprise, and no, he was not going to lose the only advantage he had in this fight. Issei was not sure if he was ready for the balance breaker Drake was talking about. He was physically ready for such transformation, but mentally, he wasn't. Doing so will probably unleash the Welsh dragon's draconic aura, and he would have no doubts that the entities in the supernatural would know about his existence if he were to do so. He needed to keep a low profile, and all of these goddamn annoying people kept attacking him from nowhere were doing their best to expose him. The most he could do was to use the basic form of the boosted gear. Thankfully, the basic form had the same appearance as a twice critical, making it easier for his subterfuge to succeed. But he was not going to use it yet, he needed to perfect moment, the only opportunity to strike the man was when his guard was lowered. He already tested the limits of the boosted gear's basic form. A single boost would be enough to strengthen his fist to the point where he could uproot a tree halfway with a single punch. "Stop dodging, you damn civilian." But the duck, Issei dodged a strike that would have sliced his head off his neck. Issei used that as an opportunity to make the exorcist lose his balance. Swiping his foot on the ground, Issei cursed when the exorcist effortlessly escaped his attempt to make the exorcist stumble on his footing. The man stepped away from him, the ominous blade on the man's hand was now sparkling with purple lightning and burning all those that touched the sparks of violet light. Even the earth was not spared when the exorcist laid the tip of the sword on the surface of the ground as he approached Issei with a grin. "Fried Selzen-sama is granting you a mercy kill, civilian. Just stay still and die." Issei looked around, trying to find any possible weapon to defend against the man in front of him. A groan of frustration escaped his lips when he saw none. All he could see was the destruction of the park brought by the lightning sword on the man's hand. He knew that he couldn't try any useless movements. The man in front of him was a psychopath, but that didn't mean the man wasn't skilled. In fact, the strikes the exorcist made were all accurate and precise. A single mistake would lead him to his death. Still, the only choice Issei had is to activate the boosted gear, losing his element of surprise in the process. The exorcist in front of him was skilled, and half-baked attempts were not going to give him any push to win against the man. The gleaming verdant light emerged from the center of the back of his left hand, and a red gauntlet soon covered his arm. The appearance of the twice critical was enough to convince Fried that the civilian he was trying to kill was not really a civilian. Boost. The grin on the exorcist's face widened to the point where it was threatening to tear his face. Issei shivered as he felt the effect first boost in his body. It was still a surreal experience for him. He could feel his bones being reinforced, his muscles hardening, and his skin being sturdier due to the effects of the sacred gear. The strike towards his abdomen soon happened, but Issei managed to block it with the crimson gauntlet on his arm. The sound of metal grinding against one another was heard reverberating all over the clearing as Issei used that small exchange to form a fist and send it towards the gray-haired exorcist's face. Boost. Just in time, the announcement of the second boost echoed as Issei felt his overall power being doubled once again. Issei managed to connect his fist onto the exorcist's cheek and send him flying away. Without wasting any time, Issei leapt from his position and headed towards the location where the exorcist crashed. He stepped backwards when he felt a sliver of killing intent directed to him. Fortunately, the katana only managed to nick the very tip of his nose as he successfully evaded an attack meant for his chin. But a surge of lightning coursed throughout his entire body. Issei couldn't move. His currently paralyzed state was enough for the exorcist to use that as an opportunity. The man pounced to him, the man's blade threatening a thrust that was directed to his heart. When the third boost happened, it was enough to revitalize his body and remove the effects of the paralysis. Boost. Issei's body reacted in time as he used his right arm to bear the brunt of the attack. He winced in pain when he felt the blade sinking through his skin. Still, this provided him a chance to attack the psychopath once again. With a full force kick, his left foot was sent towards the man's leg, and Issei cringed when he felt the contact that came with it. The sounds of bones cracking didn't help either. The shrilling scream that escaped the man's lips echoed throughout the park. Issei pulled his right arm back as he leapt backwards and hissed from the loss of the blade on his arm. His orbs of brown widened in surprise when he saw the huge gash on his arm slowly closing. Tendrils of red were slowly twisting themselves on one another as if it was repairing the wound he had. Truthfully, the sight of his wounds healing was quite disgusting. Be thankful I helped you in this endeavor. After this, I'm going to train your pathetic body. Without any fighting skills, you're basically useless in the battlefield. You're really helpful, but please do it in a manner where you won't insult your own host. The dragon didn't reply, and Issei was grateful for that. His eyebrows twitched in response when he noticed the shaking form of the exorcist in front of him. The frown soon marred his face when he noticed the sparks of purple lightning were no longer on the sword. Right now, motes of flames were encompassing the blade, few flecks of flames were being scattered as the man was waving the sword back and forth. Boost. Did something change? Did he apply a different form of magic? The exorcist took a sword position, the katana was held with both of his hands, and his left foot was one step away from the limping one. Issei's eye narrowed when he noticed something different in the sword. The orbs were no longer attached to the string of the pommel, and the blade was slightly shorter than it was. In fact, the hilt of the sword was different. Banditi-chan, his thoughts were cut off when the exorcist slashed through air as a wave of flames soon came forth from the blade of the sword. Issei cursed as he rolled sideways, barely dodging the stream of flames that soon exploded from behind. Twisting his head, he saw the trees in the park engulfed in flames as the stench of wood burning permeated in the air. Issei grunted in pain when he felt a foot in his stomach before it was followed by another kick. That was when a punch made its way on his face and soon sent him flying away, crashing to the fountain of the park. If his body wasn't enhanced by the boost he received earlier, his body would have been broken right now. Boost. Issei groaned as he slowly stood up, only to see the exorcist now coated in a shroud of oppressive black miasma. Despite the broken state of his opponent's leg, that fact didn't seem to bother the psychopath at all. Right now, he really was thankful that Drake healed the wound on his thigh. There was still a stinging pain, but that was better than the limping he was feeling earlier. At least his mobility was no longer hampered. The exorcist in front of him disappeared and suddenly reappeared in front of him. An ear-deafening sound escaped the man's lips. It was a more akin to a bestial roar than a yell of a human. A hint of fear was etched his mind when the man was no longer looking human, but more of a beast. The miasma was etched to every visible part of the skin, and the feral growl momentarily escaping his mouth from time to time was only enhancing such emotion inside of Issei. This time, the sword the man was holding vanished. In the sword's place was something different, an naginata, the black handle and its blade exuding a cold feeling. Before he knew it, the man was already behind Issei, the naginata positioned to attack his back. Boost. Another enhancement of boost that circulated inside of his body managed to save his hide. In an instant, Issei's back was already turned as he met the attack head-on. His red draconic gauntlet was grabbing the blade of the naginata as he tried to pull the said weapon away from the exorcist. His balance was suddenly disrupted when the exorcist momentarily let go of the weapon. Issei stumbled as he fell to the ground before holding back a scream when the man managed to take the weapon and strike him in the shoulder. The cold feeling entered his body as Issei felt every single vein and muscle he had on his right shoulder were slowly being frozen. He gritted his teeth in frustration before a single kick managed to connect on the man's abdomen. Thanks to the effects of the boosted gear, his kick was enough to make the man flying away from him. His foot felt the ribs cracking. Heaving a few breaths, he pulled the naginata that was stuck on his shoulder in an instant. A loud cry escaped his mouth as he felt the pole arm no longer impaled in his skin. Issei's feet were shaking as he struggled on standing up. The pain in his shoulder felt unbearable as he did his best not moving the shoulder as much as he could. Due to being frozen from inside, it felt like a single twitch on the muscle would be enough to break it. It was only thanks to Drake concentrating the effects of the boost in his healing capabilities that he was able to stand up without accidentally shattering the frozen state his shoulder had. Looking at the direction where he sent the exorcist, a small sense of relief entered him when he saw the oppressive black miasma no longer coating the man. Issei was damn sure that when the miasma happened, the overall capabilities of the man were enhanced, making it harder for Issei to fight the man. He was truly thankful when he noticed the man's unconscious and injured state of the man. It looked like Fried Selzen was subjected to a high amount of violence and bullying. His hair was disheveled, his left cheek was bruised badly, and several bruises were also seen in his body. One would be sure that the exorcist was having several broken bones. Issei should have felt pity for the man, but the man tried to kill him. So he didn't. At least he was no longer going to deal with a psychopath hell-bent on killing him. Glancing at the place where he put the Naginata, his eyes looked hesitant when he saw a card littered in the ground. The pole arm was no longer there, and in its place was the card. He wanted to kneel down in order to pick up the card, but due to the fragile state of his shoulder, he couldn't, at least not yet. "Greg, is it fine to move now?" "At least another minute, you fool. Be thankful that I'm concentrating the boost you had on your shoulder. Or you would at least wait for a whole day before the damn wound is repaired." "I see. Thanks for that." The response Issei got was a snort from the dragon. Still, he truly was thankful. Drake was right after all. Issei did not have any specific fighting style, making it harder for him to fight when he would be thrown in situations just like today. If not for Drake's help in his wounds and bruises, he would be hard-pressed on winning against a psychopathic exorcist. Sighing to himself, he waited for a minute to pass before getting Drake's approval to move. When he picked up the card, he frowned when he noticed the label at the bottom of the card. Berserker. In the center of the card, the form of a single man wielding a gigantic blade in one hand could be seen. It was a perfect image for the term berserker. Despite having limited knowledge when it came to magic, Issei was sure that this damn card was the reason why the crazed exorcist turned to a beast filled with insanity and madness. A conclusion was already made in his mind. He was not going to let anyone irresponsible to get this card. Judging from the destruction brought by a single sword of lightning and fire that emerged from the card, those who would be able to use this card effectively would be dangerous. Even Issei was not sure if the card being in his possession was the proper action. For all he knew, he could be turned into a mad beast just like the exorcist from earlier. Although, Issei knew that he could entrust the card to no one. And no, he was not going to give this card to Sona, much less Ria's Gremory. Despite Sona being his friend, she was still a devil, as she termed it herself. And giving this to Ria's Gremory would be tantamount to idiocy. Sighing to himself, a decision was formed in his mind. He was going to keep the card for himself until he had the correct person to give it to or a proper way to seal the card. He had already tried tearing the card to pieces, but it didn't work. A magical force was somehow reinforcing the card, making it indestructible. Yes, keep that for yourself. Due to your lack of fighting ability, it would be a good weapon to add in your arsenal. Hell no. I'm not using it, go ballistic and insane just like that damn exorcist sleeping on the ground. Partner, if you look to where you're pointing at, you'll see that the exorcist is no longer there. That stopped Issei on his tracks as his head snapped, glancing to the place where his finger was pointing at, only to see debris and remains of the ground, with a huge splotch of blood and empty space. Shit. The psycho escaped. You fool, don't move too much. You'll destroy your shoulder. I need to find that damn priest and put him to jail. After your shoulder's in a stable condition, you idiot. He's still around. Fool. The moment you took your eyes off him, he was already conscious. You should have told me then. You're in a battlefield. You shouldn't even be letting your guard down. Issei cursed his stupidity. Drake was correct. He shouldn't have taken his eyes off the man. Right now, because of his stupidity, it was possible that the man was killing innocents right now. Just because the man lost his weapon, it didn't mean the man couldn't kill anyone with bare hands. This day was really going great, wasn't it? First, he saw the effects of his actions, it backfired and strained his friendship with Kiba. Second, all of the devils in the school who used to be friendly with him, now feared him. Third, even Sona was discreetly avoiding him. Fourth, he was attacked by a psychopath. Fifth, the said psychopath escaped because of his idiocy. Sixth, he was holding a magical item that could bring destruction and insanity to the user. Great, his path towards being a hero was downright impossible with his actions. No hero would have let all of those events happen to him. You still have to remove that splinter out of your thigh. Funk. The woman who looked like in her mid-20s suddenly felt disoriented. Her long black hair tinted with a shade of darker midnight blue reached all the way past her waist and was tied with a white string at the end. She was dressed in a violet kimono with several petals of cherry blossoms embroidered all over the clothing. With the rays of the sun shining brightly, it made her beauty look ephemeral and exotic at the same time. The arrow she was notching from her bow was released, its expected trajectory failing to hit the target. As a hint, magical energy encompassed the arrow, a gale surrounding it before it made contact with the wall. A gigantic explosion of tempest bursting from the arrow happened as the whole area in the woman's compound shook violently. Bara. The focused expression on her face changed to that of a frown as she tried to remember the energy she had sensed in the other side of the world. It felt disturbingly similar to hers, and for some reason, it won't leave her mind. She dropped the bow she was holding and immediately went back to her room. She took a moment to meditate as she went to Issei. She closed her eyes as she began heaving a couple of breaths in and out of her mouth. The feeling of relaxation and calmness soon took over. When she opened her eyes, she was in a different place from her room. Right now, the location she reappeared was the domain of her lord. The turbulence of lightning and thunder could be felt from her position. The sound of thunder rumbling loudly was reverberating in the whole domain. Standing up, she began approaching the place where her lord would often rest and relax. As she stepped outside of the traditional compound of the god of lightning, she started walking towards the forest before she stumbled upon a cliff. The sky was blue, but was filled with a very dark shade of black that made it look like a storm would manifest any moment soon. Clouds having the momentary flash of lightning could be seen lingering in the sky. At the very edge of the cliff, a man dressed in a black kimono with a white sash tied to his waist was sitting on a makeshift tatami mat, a takuri and a large sakazuki made of porcelain on both of his hands. The man was definitely one of the most handsome men in the world. His tall and very muscular build made him look very intimidating, yet his appearance akin to a person in early 20s was a refreshing sight to see. His blue eyes had a certain electric feel in it, and his spiky light blonde hair was definitely eye-catching. Although, the annoying smirk on his face was something that always irritated the woman. The man dropped both of his drinking equipments as he waved jovially at the woman who was approaching. "Good morning, Yorimitsu, or is it evening now?" "It is evening in the other side, Raijin-sama. In our side, it is currently morning." Raijin, the one who governs the aspect of lightning, thunder and storms in the religion of Shinto. While the man is regarded as one of the minor deities of the Shinto, it is a fact that the man can stand side by side with the god of storm Susanoo. It was known that if Raijin, with the help of the Yamatsu Shikim, could fight against the creator of Japan, Izanagi, for a short time. "So what brings you here, Yorimitsu? Did you finally accept my love, oh my beautiful widow?" The man winked flirtatiously as he drank another sip from his sakazuki. Yorimitsu felt like nursing a migraine on her forehead as she held back the urge to rub it gently. "I humbly reject your feelings, Raijin-sama." The comical arrow struck the man as he clutched his chest with a pained expression. Raijin was crying tears as he sobbed silently, looking at the sky with a broken-hearted expression. "Amaterasu Amato, when will my heart finally achieve the happiness of romance?" Yorimitsu had a deadpan expression on her face, already knowing how dramatic the one whom she serves. "Raijin-sama, I would like to visit Japan for an indefinite time." The relaxed atmosphere in the air disappeared and a serious expression made its way on Raijin's face. The sakazuki, takuri and the tatami mat suddenly vanished as a small drum, a taiko-4 to be precise, manifested out of thin air. The symbol of black swirling tomos could be seen at the head of the drum. Sparks of lightning soon crackled from the head of drum. Raijin was calmly touching it while looking at Yorimitsu. "Think your words before you speak, Minamoto no Yorimitsu. I may have pardoned your life out of my son's final request. But your desecration of his resting place will never be forgotten." The passive expression on the face of the lightning god sent shivers to Yorimitsu's spine as she saw her own death happening in many different ways. A bead of sweat trickled from her temple down to her chin as she opened her mouth. "Raijin-sama, I felt my own energy in the other side, especially the artifacts given to me by my retainers." When she never got any response, she continued speaking. "However, it is impossible for my power to exist in the other side. After my ascension as your immortal emissary, all of those artifacts have become my divine armaments. I would like to find the source of the energy." The pensive silence passed for more than a minute. The way her lord was still touching the smooth surface of the drum was nerve-wracking. The continuous sparks of lightning that would momentarily occur from time to time didn't help either. "I see." Those were the only words that came out of Raijin's mouth. When another minute passed, the tense atmosphere disappeared as the darkened sky turned pure blue, with the rays of the sun shining brightly. "If your words are true, then that particular energy needs to be investigated. Very well, we will find that source." Yorimitsu lightened up as a gleeful smile graced her lips. She was banned from entering the other side of the world, but with the permission granted by Raijin, she would be able to visit her beloved child's resting place. Her cheerful mood, however, was suddenly put into a halt and she deflated when she heard the next words that came out of her lord's mouth. "I shall send her to find that source." The scowl marred her face when she realized whom Raijin was talking about. It was supposed to be her, not that damn Imkai who tricked her beloved child and ensnared his heart. Yorimitsu opened her mouth to argue, but a glare from the Narukami was enough to stop her from doing so. She could only curse the damn Imkai who was to be sent on the mission to find the source of her energy. The damn Imkai was forbidden to leave Kyoto, but with the permission to leave, the Imkai would be allowed to visit her beloved child's resting place. Even Yorimitsu would be allowed to visit her beloved child if she only managed to get permission from Raijin himself. Silently, Yorimitsu prayed to the Bindgami to give the damn Imkai misery and bad luck, although she knew that it was useless, since most of the gods favored the damn Imkai instead of her. Issei glanced at the wall clock adorning the dining room. Thankfully, he still had a few minutes to spare before classes starts. It had been a hard evening for him. The fact that he couldn't move too much last night made him take almost 2 hours before arriving back to his house. At least he was healed now. He really thanked Drake for what the Welsh dragon did last night. Drinking a sip from his hot chocolate, Issei pensively looked at the card on his hand. It was the card last night, the berserker card that managed to drive the priest to insanity and madness. Right now, Issei couldn't feel any hint of magic coming from the card. He would have been convinced that the card was ordinary, if not for the fact that the card was still indestructible. Whoever made the damn card must have been insane and out of his mind. Why create a tool that would only lead to destruction and chaos? The image of an old man showing him 7 cards was still fresh in his mind. If that image was something that he just forgot, but was true. I don't have to think about this now. Issei stood up as he took the card holder which he found in the storage room last night. Thankfully, the size of the berserker card was good enough for the card holder. When he finished drinking the last of the chocolate, he pocketed the card holder to ensure that it won't be out of his grasp. He even tied the card holder to a chain and attached it to the belt loop of his trousers. Luckily, the card holder even had a lock function at the opening, where it needed a certain amount of force before being opened. Issei was thankful that today was Friday, making it easier for him, since he won't have to deal with the fearful gazes the devils in the school were giving him tomorrow. He just hoped that Sona would soon talk to him. It was quite disheartening to know that your friend was avoiding you, despite not doing anything to her. Though from her point of view, it was understandable. He was a Longinus user who threatened her best friend, so it was logical for her to avoid him. Anyway, he had to get to school now. He only had 10 minutes before school starts. No wonder those artifacts felt familiar. One of them was used by my past host. Shuddered Drake. Wait, are you saying that one of your past hosts is a retainer of Yorimitsu? Yeah, such a pity he didn't even awaken me. It was currently homeroom for Issei. Just a few seats behind him, Kiba was just looking at the window, unperturbed of the fact that there was a transfer student in the class. Glancing back at the girl in front of him, he could only say that she was a beauty. A slim yet lithe figure, short dark purple hair with Heim-style bangs, a pale complexion and a charming smile on her face. She was dressed in the usual Kuo Academy uniform as she stood in front of the class. The only unusual on her was the takuri and the large sakazuki on her hand. The girl smiled as she reintroduced herself for the second time. Once again, my name is Shudu Tenji. I wish that none of you will serenade me, for I already have someone who belongs in my heart. Nevertheless, all of you are free to try. After all, I know how to bite. The fanged grin on her face made all of the males in the room, save for Issei and Kiba, shiver in response. With that, the girl named Shudu Tenji was directed towards her seat, which unfortunately was the seat just besides Issei, right next to the window. Brag, what do I do? Don't care. Deal with it yourself. The Welsh dragon snorted at him before cutting the mental connection they had. Issei mentally cursed the dragon for being useless at this kind of situation. The paranoia he had regarding his subterfuge didn't help, since he thought that he was only a few days away from being exposed as the Sekiryuite. Issei never thought that the infamous Oni of Mount Ooe would appear in his town, much less become a transfer student in his class. Still, the appearance of Shuten Daoji was quite surprising to say at least. That sparked a question in his mind. Could he give the berserker card to the Imkai? Or would such action prove to be foolish? Bragg had mentioned that the Imkai faction is under the rule of the Shinto pantheon, and Issei could only conclude that they would send her to find the artifacts inside of the berserker card. The artifacts of the Big Four of Yorimitsu are part of the Japanese history, so it was obvious why they rightfully belong to the Shinto. Fool, the card is a spoil of war. It's rightfully yours. I told you, Drag, I don't want a magical item that trades my sanity for power. Then what? You think you're going to win against your future enemies without any weapons? Know that the boosted gear won't be enough to defeat everyone. It may be called a Longinus, a sacred gear that could potentially kill God, but without mastering it, the host would still be weak. It would take years before you master it. What do you suggest I do then? Issei thought with an irritated expression on his face. He did not want the card for obvious reasons, but his partner was adamant on him keeping it all because it could give him power. He was not a power-hungry fool. Keep it. You don't have to use it always. Use it whenever you're in a pinch. When the exorcist used the lightning sword, he was still sane. It probably means that you cannot use it for a long time. Greg was correct. The exorcist was using the sword of purple lightning while still retaining his sanity. The only downside of the card was when freed Selzen used the second one and the third one, the katana that had flames with it in the Naginata. What about the fact that the artifacts inside the card are weapons of Yorumitsu's retainers? Deal with it yourself. I've enough of your yapping. Great. Drake was simply telling him to keep the artifacts for himself and deal with the consequences that come with it. Issei felt like a migraine was attacking his head. He'd enough headaches as it is. This damn dragon was basically useless when the situation is no longer a battlefield. Even though there was the snarl that echoed deep inside of his mind, Issei didn't care. Drake was such an ass, a snarky and prideful ass to be precise. Can you perhaps stop staring at me? Issei blinked twice when he heard someone's voice. It snapped him out of his thoughts, and Issei could only look at the purple-haired girl beside him, the Oni who was sitting on the chair with a relaxed expression. Sorry about that, Shudu-san. Issei scratched the back of his head with an awkward smile, but the Oni was unperturbed. The name's Haidu Issei, by the way. Nice to meet you. Likewise. And perhaps we could take this conversation for another time, with a cup of sake of course. She poured the liquid that came out of the takuri and slowly sipped from her sakazuki. Alas, that got the teacher's attention. Shudu Tenji-san, drinking sake is not allowed in this school. And you are still a minor. Please hand those to me. The teacher approached the girl with a chiding expression on his face. Nevertheless, the Oni just ignored the teacher as she continued drinking. That snapped the teacher as a throbbing vein appeared on his temple. You're walking on a thin line, Shudu-san. I advise you to hand those to me right now. The girl simply smiled nonchalantly as she poured another in her sakazuki. And what she did next was unexpected. She raised the sakazuki and offered it to the teacher. You should relax. Perhaps you'd be better with a drink. Opening his mouth, the teacher was about to yell to the girl when she interrupted him. Worry not. This is not sake. She stated as she gracefully drank from the sakazuki. This is just water. Those words of her made everyone's eyes widen in surprise. Even the teacher himself had a shocked expression on his face as he stared at the takuri, not believing her at all, he demanded. I see. Please hand me the takuri then. The girl complied as she handed the porcelain takuri without hesitation. After inspecting the water inside of the takuri, the teacher handed it back reluctantly. Very well. I apologize for raising my voice. Do know that I won't tolerate your disrespect next time, Shudu-san. And please avoid drinking in the sakazuki. It gives the wrong impression. The girl merely smiled at the teacher indulgently as she sipped on the sakazuki once again. I make no promises, sensei. When the teacher left their presence, she turned to Issei, pouring another batch of the water to her sakizaki, raising it as she offered it to Issei. Perhaps you'd like one as well, Haidu Issei. And that was how the first meeting between Haidu Issei and the infamous Oni of Mount Ooe. Shutendaoji went. Issei was calmly sitting on the bench table in the rooftop of the new school building, eating his bento with a passive face. On the inside though, he was mentally rambling as he stole a glance at the purple-haired beauty sitting in front of him, drinking on her sakazuki with a blissful expression. Why the hell was she sitting with him in the first place? You've been looking at me from time to time. Would you like a drink? The Oni offered only to be refused by Issei, who took the canister on his side and began drinking the water inside of it. When he finished drinking, he looked at her as he spoke. Shudu-san, can I ask why are you accompanying me? As far as you could see, I'm not exactly the most sociable person in the school. The girl raised her eyebrows in response as she poked the melon on her own bento. Per se, it was surprising to say at least. The Oni were supposed to be man-eating monsters, yet one of the most infamous yokai was in front of him, eating fruits coupled with a few sips from her sakazuki. By now though, Issei was sure that liquid in her sakazuki was now sake. Should I avoid you then? When Issei didn't answer, she continued. To be honest, I find you interesting, Haidu Issei. There are only a particular number of devils in this institution, yet all of them are avoiding you. You must be a powerful human to have instilled such amount of fear inside of them. When I talked to the student council president this morning, it was amusing to see her being more afraid, something more than the diabolical Oni of Mount Ooe. That made Issei rather suspicious, his eyes narrowing slightly as she looked at the girl. Did Sona Kaichu tell you what I am? The girl merely shook her head in response before eating a slice of mango in her bento. They say that the eyes are windows to the soul. All I saw is that she was afraid of something. When Issei looked at her curiously, she shook her head for the second time. No, her fear towards me is not the main reason why she was afraid. It was as if she was afraid that something would happen to this school. And when I saw 3 of our classmates, which were all devils avoiding you and looking at you fearfully, I connected the dots. The alcohol went from the drinking cup towards her mouth as she drank. That begs the question, what are you then? Based from your energy, you're just human, perhaps a descendant or maybe a sacred gear user. Issei's hand twitched as it consciously made its way towards his pocket. When he felt the card holder opening, his hand was now touching the smooth surface of the card as he looked at the girl in front of him, drinking without any care. Be at ease. I'm just talking to you. I simply want to relax, drink and talk about meaningless things. Such as sighing. Issei locked the card holder once again and drew his hand outside of his pocket. Taking another bite from his bento, he spoke. By the way, you're an Oni. I suppose you eat humans? Issei asked with a hint of hesitation, and the Oni merely laughed at his expense. Eating another slice of melon in her bento, she spoke. Of course I do. I'm feared for a reason, hi to Issei. But the gods had forbid us to eat those unrelated to the supernatural. But since you know about its existence, I can eat you anytime I want. Issei chuckled nervously as he took another bite from his bento. Don't worry. The Shinto gods had given the Japanese yakuza an eternal decree. We're only allowed to eat those who prove to be a threat to our faction, and with a good reason, although we eat human scum such as rapists and murderers from time to time. With his question answered, Issei became silent once again before asking another question. What would you do if I'm a descendant or a sacred gear user? The Oni smiled, pouring another in her sakazuki, and offered it to Issei. Nothing. Although I would prefer it if you were pledge your loyalty to Shinto, if not me. Reluctantly, Issei took the sakazuki and drank in it. Issei would have coughed if not for the fact that his mother trained him to be resilient in drinking alcoholic drinks. The alcohol went smoothly down to his throat as he continued drinking until the last drop. Handing the porcelain drinking cup back to the Oni, he refused her offer. Unfortunately, I'm not willing to be a subordinate of someone else, more so since I barely escaped when I was almost turned into a servant without my own consent. The Oni merely hummed in response, not even caring about his words as she ate the banana in her bento. You didn't answer my question. She pointed out as Issei inwardly cursed. He thought that he managed to avoid that question perfectly. Taking another drink of his oolong tea, he then spoke after placing the canister to the table. I'm a sacred gear user, and if you'd like to know what it is, here. Issei revealed the basic form of his boosted gear, the initial state which looked similar to the twice critical. The red gauntlet covered his hand and a small portion of his arm, and a green orb was embedded with it. The interest in the Oni's eyes disappeared as Issei saw a small glimmer of disappointment as well. Unfortunately, he didn't notice the glint of suspicion. Regardless, Issei didn't care since it would be easier to be hidden, no one knew that he had a longinus. Fool, all of the devils here in Kuo know that you have the boosted gear. Shut it, Drag. I know I made a mistake. And they didn't tell anyone, so it should be fine. Why do you keep rubbing it in my face? He got no response, and Issei knew that the Welsh dragon was just messing around with him. He just hoped that none of the devils would mention to Shuten Daoji that he was a longinus user. He was already paranoid when it came to devils, and he didn't need the eyes of the Shinto and Yakai on him as well. Ding dong ding dong. Issei was already finished eating when the bell rang, indicating the end of lunch break. He stood up as he finished arranging his bento. Well, it seems that our time is up. See you in the next class, Shuten Daoji-san. But those words, Issei left the rooftop, leaving the Oni all alone. Shuten Daoji looked at the sky with a wistful expression as she drank on her sakazuki one last time. For some reason, I see you in him, why? Shaking her head as she removed those thoughts out of her mind, she looked at the door where Haidu Issei left. If your sacred gear is a mere twice critical, then why are you feared by both heiresses of Citri and Gremory clan? It has been a day ever since Shuten Daoji arrived in Kuo. And to be honest, it was quite a new experience for Issei. Even though it has been 5 days ever since he confronted Ria's Gremory, Sona was still avoiding him, and Kiba was no longer talking to him. Although he could see them from time to time, as if they were mustering their courage to talk to him. Issei sighed in disappointment as he remembered it. He could accept that despite the regret he was feeling, seeing that he was probably threatening them, more so in the case of Kiba. He was practically flooding the clubroom of a cult research club with the draconic aura that came with the boosted gear. It must have been a dreadful experience for Kiba. And so, Issei found a new friend in a man-eating monster. Even though Shuten Daoji was always drinking sake wherever they go, she was quite an easy person to get along with, as long as he himself would also drink whenever she offered him one. He was quite thankful to God or whoever that the devils were not speaking of his boosted gear towards Shuten Daoji. It seemed that Ria's assumption of him being a part of Shinto and the fact that he was getting along with Shuten Daoji solidified that assumption, prompting the devils to believe that Shuten Daoji already knew of his existence as the Sekiryuite. Although he felt bad from abusing the assumptions, he realized its importance. Being discovered as a new Sekiryu, it was possible that he would be forced by Shuten Daoji to pledge his fealty towards her, the Shinto, and no. He was not going to do that, even if the Oni was already his friend. And for some reason, Shuten Daoji was already first name basis with him and he was giving her a nickname, Shu. Her reasoning was that she didn't like the formality that came when using his family name or his full name and she requested him to shorten her name to Shu. He didn't bother asking why. When I asked why the god sent you here, that did not meant helping you with your endeavor, Shu. Issei deadpanned as he stared at the kimono-clad Oni walking beside him. Since it was Saturday, Shuten Daoji was no longer dressed in the Kuo school uniform and donned a purple kimono with intersecting red lines and pictures of fruits adorning her whole clothing. As for him, he was dressed in a simple manner, white shirt worn underneath a black leather jacket folded up to his elbow and black trousers, with a chain hanging from the belt loop which went inside of his pocket. It was the card holder for the Berserker card. Shuten Daoji's horns were now visible from her forehead. It seemed that she was hiding them when she arrived at the school. Her overall appearance was weird to say at least, but since Issei did not want to be eaten anytime soon, he held back from speaking. As Issei looked around, it was a unique place to say at least. Ironically and irritatingly, he was in the damn park where he was almost killed by a fallen angel and a psychopath. His visit right now, it was the damn third time. Was there something important in this park? Whenever he goes in this damn park, it was always related to the damn supernatural. Sighing to himself, he took the sakazuki offered by the Oni and drank the sake slowly. When he finished, he handed it back to the Oni who smiled at him. Issei, you told me earlier that I can ask for your help, didn't you? And I'm regretting I said that. He quipped back as he hid his nervousness from arriving at the scene where his opponent unleashed flames and lightning just to destroy the park. Looking at the park, it was pure devastation. Crevices and cracks were all over, the fountain was turned to rubble, the flames and lightning last night singed most of the visible surface on the earth, and the trees surrounding the park were burned to ashes, leaving a few trunks and branches black. By the way, what happened to your meeting with the Gremory and Citri peerage yesterday? The next response was something unexpected, yet obvious at the same time. Shuten Daoji laughed lightly as she ate a small melon whole. After gulping it, she grinned at him mischievously. It was amusing to say at least. Issei rolled his eyes at the answer. It probably was, and even more. To what pleasure do I owe this visit, Shuten Daoji of Mount Ooe? Ria's Gremory spoke with elegance in her tone as she offered a beautiful smile. It is not much. I was simply ordered by my superiors to inspect a source of energy detected last night, which seemed to belong to one of the god's emissary. I will probably go back after my mission. The Oni stated as she drank her sake. A twitch in Ria's eyebrows probably meant she was not taking this kind of situation well. Sitting beside her was Sona, who had already talked to the Oni early in the morning, as she was the one who instated the Oni as a student in the school, which was requested by Shuten Daoji herself. Still, that begged the question why she wanted to be a student. Can I ask for how long will your mission go? Grabbing a fruit out of the sleeve of her kimono, she began biting on the ripe mango while drinking the sake. After she gulped it down to her throat, she smiled, a hint of malevolence could be detected on her voice as she spoke. Why ask? So you can remove me from your territory. Ria's paled as an oppressive aura started covering Shuten Daoji. The smile that seemed to reach her eyes was becoming more demonic as the seconds were passing by. Amaterasu-sama had told me that you had the nerve to claim a piece of Japan as your territory. I wonder, do you like where those bountiful breasts of yours belong? A fanged grin graced her lips as she licked it consciously, eyeing Ria's breasts as if it were food. What about you, Citri heiress, do you like your legs and arms attached to your body? I happen to find devils better delicacies than humans, especially since they're always brimming with demonic energy. The two heiresses went wide as all of their servants suddenly tensed. All of them had their guard up and was ready to move any moment. Then the grin was replaced by a gentle smile, like one would use for a friend. I'm merely jesting. We don't want the sister of the Lucifer and the Leviathan to be traumatized, do we? Taking out a piece of paper, several fruits emerged from the paper as the seal broke down. When she poured a small amount of energy on the second paper she took out, 2 huge gourds of sake appeared. Since I happen to be intruding your territory, I would like to give offerings for my stay here in Kuo. Worry not. I swear in Amaterasu-sama's name that all of these are genuine offerings. They came from my brewery and my land. Standing up, she started walking away from the group and as she stood in front of the door, she spoke. I'll be enjoying my vacation, as I would like to aptly describe it. After all, hundreds of years being confined in Kyoto, even a lackadaisical Oni like me would find it to be boring. When Issei heard the story, the last part of it piqued his curiosity. As far as he knew, Shuten Daoji was supposed to have been beheaded by Yorimitsu himself after being tricked to drink the divine Oni poison sake. Nevertheless, he didn't ask anything. It's obvious that it was a sore topic for the Oni. So, what are we doing? Nothing much. I don't plan to finish this mission as early as possible. I'm going to enjoy the outside world for as long as I can. Shuten Daoji stated as she gulped another drink of sake in her sakazuki. Although, I plan on finding the energy source fast, if it escaped, my superiors will get mad. She handed her Takuri and sakazuki to Issei as she closed her eyes and began standing still. A second later, a burst of vast energy erupted from her being as Issei watched her in amazement. As she opened her eyes, Shuten Daoji began reading the flow of energy in the clearing. As she began walking, Issei followed her shortly until they stopped on a particular spot. Issei inwardly cringed as he remembered that location. There were a few rubbles, but he could see it clearly, the splotch of blood. She's right. The artifacts of her retainers were here. Issei withheld from speaking as he instantly closed his mouth shut. He was not going to let his mouth speak without thinking of the consequences. He was surprised to know that the historical figure was actually alive. More so that Minamoto no Yorimitsu was actually a woman all along. Shuten Daoji began walking once again as she reached another particular spot. That was when Issei froze. He knew this spot. It was where he fell down as his shoulder was pierced by the freezing Naginata. His mind stopped working when he saw a small, very small but visible shade of red on the surface of the earth. It was his blood. Shuten Daoji stood up as she turned around and faced Issei with a passive expression. Tell me Issei, why can I read a small amount of your spirit in this location? And? So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this story with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.